Everyone. Oh, now it's recording. Okay. Hi. My name is Renee Moda Jackson. I'm the program director for the Department of Social Services for disaster case management. This is going to be a quick overview of what we do and why we do it. What is DCMP? Disaster case management is a time and scope limited intervention program that provides disaster survivors with a single point of contact to access a broad range of programs, services, resources to address disaster case caused unmet needs. It supplements, not supplants, existing services. The staff for the DCMP for the Department of Social Services are myself, Renee Moda Jackson. Here's my contact email and phone number. And our financial staff personnel is Susan Kantner, and here's her information. And she's primarily doing 4558 and 4569 for invoices and financial questions. And new to our group, a financial staff contact person is Annette Licardo, and she'll talk a little bit into our presentation today. And here's her email and point contact. So for the Department of Social Services, there's just 3 of us. The purpose is the disaster case management. It augments existing state or tribes and local capacity to provide disaster case management services. It's providing disaster case management services to vulnerable populations impacted by the declared disaster. And addresses unmet needs caused by the declared disaster, including housing, clothing, transportation, and food. Stakeholders are the federal government who's funding the program, the state who's administering the program, voluntary organizations, and survivors. It basically is coordinating efforts for the government and volunteer agencies depend on each other to assist survivors, how the caseworkers, as many of you that are on the call are, and how we communicate with the local community. And it promotes communication and collaboration. Why do we do this? It eliminates duplication of services. It provides effective service to the community, provides services to diverse groups, enhance problem solving ability, and specialized expertise. It includes housing, so disaster case managers assist the survivors with housing issues and help them get connected to programs. Management agency contracting. In the past, the last 7 disasters, the state of California, through the Department of Social Services, has contracted with the management agency to coordinate the collaboration of hiring the providers and case managers. And as you know, for this disaster, it's California Catholic Charities. And their role is to coordinate it with the providers and also funnel all the invoices to us, the state. When do we start delivering services? It says once this disaster starts, but it's really once we get case managers up and running, but we can get funded back to the start of it. But we have been contracting with California Catholic Charities because they've had this network or coordinate with the network to help survivors. In order to get these funds, mind you, these funds come from FEMA. First, a major declaration must be declared. So the governor of the state of California asks the president, can we have a major declaration? And it's a very detailed, complex supporting information of why we need a major declaration. It's when it goes outside the scope that California can handle. So once that major declaration is received and individual assistance is granted, and that's like a part of major declaration, then we, the state, ask for funds for disaster case management. We also, here's a little checkpoint, the county must agree to accept it. So each county does have a choice whether they want the free disaster case management services. So if you're familiar with anything in last year, we had 2 major disasters, but only 4610, the one that we're talking about today, was granted individual assistance. So we have the disaster case management program. The 4619, which was the Calder fire, the one you saw up in Tahoe, they did not get that funding, so we do not have a program for them. Timeline, what happens? After we get a major declaration, we, the state, have to submit an application, and we have to declare what we're going to do, what is the need, what is the breakdown of how many homes, how many survivors, and why do we need these funds. So we have 90 days from the time of the disaster to apply. And we actually made it in 60 days and sent it to the federal government. And then there's a waiting period of they're reviewing it. And once they approve it, if our request is over $1 million, we have to get presidential, it's congressional approval. And then we still have to wait to get an actual award letter. And so this is just to let you kind of know why it takes so long to get going. It's because first you have the disaster, then you have to make sure that it's actually declared and you can get funding. Then we have to ask for funding and have to do a very detailed application, which the management agency actually helps us write. And then we submit it to FEMA, and then we have to wait for their approval. And that goes back and forth with budgets, because we don't just say, please give us the money. We have to detail exactly what we're going to do with it, who's going to provide the services, and what we're going to do. So for this particular grant, we got our actual award in February. So you can imagine, started in August, and we didn't get our award from FEMA until February. So unfortunately, that's what it takes us a little while to get going. The application process explained, I'm not going to read all this. I know we have a full agenda, but this is pretty much what I just said about the 90 days, what we have to do, that we need a needs assessment, a justification breach, development of a budget. We, of course, have to get the providers in the area who will be delivering these services. And we have to tell all that to FEMA. And once we get it, like I said, there it is, congressional approval. Then we wait for the award. Now, the other thing that slows us down is we did get the award in February, but then we have to get in contractual agreement with our management agency. And we cannot do that until we get the award. And we're not quite in contractual agreement, but we're hoping within the next week. The contracting process takes a long time too. We have to do all of our documentation with us, and with us when I mean the state and the management agency, and then it has to go through our contract process. The part that many of you that are part of is the memorandums of understanding that CCC has with the providers. I know they put up preliminary ones to guarantee you funding to start, and then they have secondary MOUs once they have a contract in place. And as this outlines, it usually takes 4 months, and we're not quite there yet, but we wanted to get going, of course, because the survivors need assistance as soon as possible. Invoice process. I'm going to turn this over to Annette Liccardo, who is, as I pointed out, your point of contact for invoices. And Annette, do you want to come on and talk about this? And just tell me next, and I'll go to the next one.
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Annette Liccardo. I work with Renee and Susan, and I'll be the one reviewing and approving for payment the invoices. So I'll just quickly go over that process. The management agency submits the main invoice monthly. The invoice will contain the cumulative expenditures for the management agency and the service providers. The service providers will submit their invoices, receipts, and backup documentation to the management agency monthly. Subrecipients awarded funds from the service provider will reconcile expenses on a monthly basis, prepare an invoice, and submit the invoice with receipts and backup documentation to the service provider. All expenses for the service providers must be reconciled into an invoice and submitted on a monthly basis to the management agency with no exception. Next slide. Okay, here's an example of the invoice document. So this is an example what California Catholic Charities would be submitting, and St. Vincent de Paul, which would actually include a line where you can see highlighted down there, provider agency subgrants. They would have a separate line for that information. Next slide. And here's an example of how the invoice would look for Connecting Point, Plumas Rural Services, and MVCSS. As you can see, it does not have that sub grant recipient line. Next slide. Request for expenditure, also known as a budget change request, must be submitted if the item needed is not listed as a line item in the budget, the original budget. This document is available from the management agency. The management agency is responsible for submitting the request for expenditures to the state for approval. If necessary, the state will submit the request for expenditure to FEMA for approval. Next slide. And that's it for me. I'll turn it back over to you, Renee.
Thank you very much, Net. As we were saying, the financial people from management agency will be working with Annette to process your invoices. And we just wanted to make a brief point about how very important it is to be accurate in your invoices and have your backup documentation. So you know you have your budgets and you have to stick to them. Anything outside, you have to get approval. So the key steps in the DCM process are the intake, of course. You determine your client needs, you triage them. I don't really need to tell you all that what you're doing, but this is basically what we're funding. Remember, funding's coming from FEMA to the state and then out to the management agency and the providers. You're assessing the client's strengths and barriers, developing individualized recovery plans, using referrals and advocacy for resources to address unmet needs. You follow up with the clients and agree to recovery plans and identify new referrals and actions for unmet needs when criteria for closure are met in closed cases. Site visits. I want to briefly talk about this just so you're aware, people who are case managers and the providers. We will, as the state of California, do site visits. I want to plan to get them going hopefully by the end of the summer and maybe late July and August, because we are responsible to make sure that this program goes smoothly. We will give you notice. We will send you a documentation that you have to fill out. But basically, we want to see what you've been doing, how you've been doing it, what's working well, what do you need from us, and it's our job just to make sure that the funds are being utilized just as they were outlined in your budgets, and that all the resources are coordinated. And we plan to also have a site visit for the end. But in the beginning, if you think about it, I know that Shama CCC has been talking about it. We would like to get out and see some of your outreach events and coordinate that with site visits. But I wanted everyone to be aware that we do site visits. In conclusion, I try to do this quickly on a fast one. Just want to let you know the state is here. Our role is to make sure everything goes smoothly. And I also want to make sure you understand that you have issues. Please let us know. You can let your providers know, case managers know, and then CCC can let us know. Also, when you're doing your monthly reports, please put the information of what's working well, what's not working well, what your issues are, because that's the only way we can change the program and improve it. And FEMA wants to know these things, including if you have websites that go up with information, all your outreach events, please make sure you include all that. So does anyone have any questions for me before we go on to the next segment? No, because it's too early. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and let us go to the next one.
I have a quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
I missed the first like 10 minutes, 10, maybe 15 minutes because of internet issues. Can you just give me like a one sentence overview of what you shared in the beginning?
Basically, in the beginning, we just talked about what is disaster case management and our state role. And
Okay.
that is that we administer the program for FEMA. The funding comes from FEMA
Okay.
after a major declaration and individual assistance is granted. And we administer the program and we contract with the management agency, which is California Catholic Charities. And then like I said, you'll hear from us. We were just trying to explain what our role, the state of California, is in administering the programs. Like I said, the funding comes from FEMA, but we administer the program and contract with management agency. And everything is outlined when we get the approval and budgets. So that's it in a nutshell. And I do believe they're going to send you our PowerPoint when they give you a copy of the recordings and all the presentations today. So
Okay.
that should help you. But it also has our contact information if you ever want to contact us.
Great.
I saw a
Thank
couple.
you.
Yeah, I saw a couple of hands go up. Was there anyone else? Or did I just say that quickly? Any other questions for me, state of California?
There
And
was
I'm
a
Renee
question in
Mother-
the chat, Renee, but I went ahead and answered it.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Susan. Like I said, you'll get a copy of this, so you won't really have missed anything. Okay. All right. We, the state, will be on both days. So if anyone has any questions and wants to follow up, we'll be looking at the chat and we'll also be assisting in any way. Okay, I'm going to stop share so they can get to the next group. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Renee. So that was a quick overview of disaster case management at the state level. And as Renee mentioned, they are, the state management or state agency. So that's California Department of Social Services. I know that was a question in the chat. Okay, so next up is me. So give me 1 second here. All right, good morning, everyone. So don't believe I already introduced myself. I think I just assumed that everyone already knows me. My name is Shama Patel. I also go by Shama Melvin, which is my married name. I am the program director for the disaster case management here at Catholic Charities of California. We are the management agency for all of the disaster case management programs so far, including 4610. Just a quick overview of my team here. So like I said, I'm Shama Patel. We also have Andres Molina. He is our data director. Most of you will work with him regarding ETO and any other data questions that you might have. Michael Fontana, who's not here today, he is our program manager. He kind of handles all of the coordinating equipment, general questions, that kind of thing. Melanie, she is our data manager and she runs ETO office hours. So for those of you that don't know, every Friday from 12 to 2 for our disaster case management provider agencies, we have office hours. So you can jump on via the link and get any technical assistance that you need for that. And then lastly, we have Annie Granici, who is our CPA. She's just kind of fiscal. So any invoice questions would go directly to her. Renee already kind of covered most of this, but just really briefly, Catholic Charities organizations have been involved in disaster case management both locally and nationally since 1960s. Typically, they provide services using private donations, grants, or volunteers. When it comes to the federal disaster case management program, it is, as Renee mentioned, a new commitment of federal funding to support disaster case management. So that is enacted when the president gives a presidential declaration. It is a part of FEMA's individual assistance program. And multiple Catholic Charities agencies across the country have acted as either a management agency or a provider agency under this structure. So just kind of basic hierarchy. So of course we have FEMA, who implements the disaster case management program or initiates it. And then we, CDSS works with Cal OES for the individual assistance. They just handle the disaster case management portion. And then CCC is the management agency. So I contract directly with the state. My point of contact would be Renee. And then for all of my provider agencies, which we will do introductions shortly, any questions or anything like that, you would ask me and I relay that to the state and so on. Just kind of my role basically is, we are, like I mentioned, state level representative for local Catholic Charities organizations. We identify, obtain, and administer both the regional and statewide social service grants and contracts. We subcontract with local service providers to provide the direct services. So we specifically don't do any type of direct service. That's what all of our provider agencies are for. We do all of the data and reporting to CDSS and FEMA. And then we also provide training and technical assistance. This includes the administrative side for ETL, as I mentioned. And I already kind of talked about what disaster case management is. It's a time-limited process. Again, it's supplemental. So it's not supposed to be the main, main disaster case management. But I know that in recent years, just due with COVID and lack of funding, it's kind of trending that way. But just as a reminder for all of my provider agencies, it is supposed to be a supplemental program. So it's not something that goes typically beyond 2 years unless we get an extension. The goals of disaster case management is to help survivors access resources to address their unmet needs, disaster-related unmet needs, I should say, through assistance, referrals, advocacy, that kind of thing. We ensure efficient and proper use of resources. So that's, vetting the survivor's needs, verifying that they actually have disaster-related loss, following the sequence of delivery, which I know that we will get to later with FEMA, and then walking survivors and their families through the recovery process, because it's long, it's confusing, there's a lot of in and outs, there's just a lot of steps to it. It's not just, there's a fire, I need to rebuild. So with disaster case management, we are coordinating amongst other service providers and disaster recovery partners, which is kind of the point of this meeting. So we'll get to hear from just a variety of different disaster recovery partners and kind of the resources and services that they provide and how DCM kind of correlates with or not. Typically, we share information, of course, once a ROI, release of information, is signed. The main thing with the coordination with other agencies is that we typically have separate goals. So disaster case management is working on disaster related needs and goals. And then some other agencies may be working on, say the survivor has been working with a case manager before the fire for mental health or anything else. So those would be separate. We can work in collaboration to make sure there's no duplication of services. But generally the needs and goals, they may overlap, but we're not all working towards the same thing. This is just kind of a little graph to show you that disaster case management really is the hub of recovery. We help with housing needs, any access and functional needs, emotional and spiritual care, employment, transportation, loss and of personal property. That goes beyond housing. Somebody's lost all the tools that they use for their main source of work. Okay, I know that was really quick, but next I wanted to just kind of take a moment and introduce our provider agencies under 4610. So I know that not everyone hits here from the agency, so I'll just kind of call on the point of contacts that I do know, and if somebody else wants to jump in and do a quick introduction, please feel free. For Northern Valley Catholic Social Services, I believe Cindy is on. So Cindy, would you mind just introducing yourself?
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. I apologize, I'm on the road. But my name is Cindy. I am the program manager of disaster case management for 4558 and 4610.
Thank you, Cindy. And for those of you that don't know, Northern Valley Catholic Social Services is providing services in Plumas, Trinity, and Tehama counties. Next, we have St. Vincent de Paul, and I just wanted to kind of clarify that St. Vincent de Paul is an oversight agency, so they're kind of helping provide, or they're contracting out with Plumas Rural Services and Connecting Point. So I believe Norma Abrego is with St. Vincent de Paul.
Hello, everyone. My name is Norma Abrego. I'm a program manager with St. Vincent de Paul. And as Shama said, we're the oversight agency. working with Pluma's Rural Services and Connecting Point. I'm not sure if anyone's on from Connecting Point because there's a fire right now in Nevada County.
Thank you, Norma. With Plumas Rural Services, I believe Paula was on. If not, I think I saw Nancy.
Yeah, hi, I'm here. I'm Paula Johnston from Plumas Rural Services. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and I'm responsible for disaster case management.
Thank you, Paula. And Plumas Rural Services is covering both Plumas and Lassen. So they're working very closely with Northern Valley Catholic Social Services and of course St. Vincent de Paul to kind of make sure that disaster recovery is collaboration. And then I'm not sure if Sarah is here from Connecting Point, but if not, it's not a big deal. They are serving Nevada and Placer County for the river fire. And we will have all of their contact information and that kind of thing later. If you're not sure, you can always send me an email and I can put you in contact with all of them. The last thing is how to get connected to services. So we, during the 2020 wildfires, implemented a statewide disaster case management phone line. So this is the number, it's 833-775-3267. It is on demand, it's HIPAA compliant, but we also have translation and interpretation services. Those are available upon request. The statewide phone line is available in both Spanish and English currently, and it will connect you to provider agencies based on the county. So if you're a survivor, or you know someone that is needing services, if they call this number, it will give options for different counties and connect them to the correct provider agency. And that is it on my end. I know that was really fast. I apologize. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Shama. And just for everyone's information, we'll make sure these slides are available to you after. Give me just a sec, because I'm very bad at this game. Play from start. There we go. Am I sharing my screen and do you see it the right way? Do you see my notes or do you see the actual screen?
I mean, I see your actual PowerPoint.
Okay, so you don't see all my notes and everything. Okay.
No.
Sorry. I have a double screen and I'm always paranoid you're going to see all my verbal vomit on the side.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us and thank you Renee and Shama for introducing the DCMP component. So just Shama and I did this last year for the 2020 fires because we had a mix of DCMP and non-DCMP events, and what we found is that it was vital to get everybody on the same page, because just because your community doesn't have a DCMP now doesn't mean we won't in the future. And so we want to take advantage of these opportunities to get everybody on the same page and learn more. These are learning opportunities for us. So John Chavez and I are with San Diego VOAD. We're going to talk a little bit about long-term recovery groups and DCM best practices from the perspective of our community's fire. So we're going to talk a little bit about how this is different from the VOAD effort, what it looks like with agencies participating roles, resources available, data, disaster case management, and then kind of how things wrap up. I'm the chair of San Diego VOAD. I'm also the Santa Cruz County Long-Term Recovery Group outgoing chair. I've been doing that for 2 years and just cycled off this month. John is he's our liaison with the San Diego VOAD as well. He's also an emergency manager and instructor. And I'll turn it over to John in a few minutes. I'm going to run through my slides, give John a better intro than I just did, and we'll get going. So long-term recovery, and I know we've invited some of the long-term recovery groups here. So for case management, just knowing how you fit in this larger picture, right? So, long-term recovery is that period where actual rebuilding of homes and lives occurred. It's long, it's exhausting, it's rewarding. It usually occurs when the disaster is over for most folks. And it's community led. It's where the community gathers beyond relief to actually rebuilding. If your community has a COAD, excuse me, and I can't use that word anymore, a VOAD, it's the committee, usually a committee under that activates post-disaster to handle these needs. If everyone were adequately insured and had sufficient resources, we might not need it, but we find most often that after disaster, all the resources people have are insufficient to meet the need. And we're going to help them meet that new normal. Unfortunately, for most people, it's not a return to their pre-disaster status. So VOAD, just stepping back here, in case you're unfamiliar with the term VOAD, the National VOAD Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster has 50 state chapters. California is odd. We have a Northern California and Southern California, but for the national perspective, there's 50 chapters with multiple county and community chapters underneath it. We're going to provide you a long-term recovery guide afterwards that was created by National VOAD, and it's the blueprint most communities work from post when they respond to a disaster. And VOADs respond to all phases of disaster. So it's not just recovery. They're also involved in mitigation, preparedness, and response. Here's a quick slide to outline the differences between the two. What's the difference? VOAD is engaged, immediately prior to long-term recovery. It's administer, manage, and prioritize recovery assistance. I'm not going to dive deep into this. You'll have this information afterwards, but we felt it was important to break out the two. Long-term recovery, that's that community-led collaboration. Your purpose can be very broad or very narrow. It's usually established by the community, often with outside assistance. Your state and your FEMA VALs will help move this process along to connect you to resources to help you with this, as well as the state VOAD. And it really is just, it's a collaboration of the resources available in your community and in the larger community that can help. This is a sample of a mission statement, just so you can see what they say they're going to do: provide recovery services. Our best practice, obviously, services provided regardless of individuals' race, creed, color, gender, disability, or religious preference. We want to see everybody fully recover. And then having this committee in place not only assists during the time of immediate aftermath of disaster, but also meeting the needs of people year round. Think about it in terms of the work you do in this disaster now will improve, for example, like your access and functional needs, which is why we bring this in when you're looking at mitigation and preparedness in the future. You're going to know what gaps you have in the community. The advantage of the long-term recovery group, we've got the 4 C's that VOAD's based on: collaboration, cooperation, communication, coordination, avoiding duplicated benefits to stretch dollars and help more people, access to those agencies simultaneously, and it just expands opportunities for agencies to assist by creating that framework. Pass over here. So advantages, benefits of collective problem solving. To make these advantages a reality. You've got several tasks to handle once you form. These are the benefits of getting there, and I am going to go to the next slide and introduce John Chavez. John is an emergency manager and reservist FEMA VAL. I've worked with him on many disasters in the VAL role and also in San Diego VOAD. And when he's not on assignment, he's an active member of San Diego VOAD, and he's representing our VOAD on this presentation. And just to put it in perspective, when COVID hit and everything shut down, John and I tag teamed in the mark that was set up by the county to handle our response for the community. We ended up pulling in several thousand volunteers to help feed people, feed children, do all of this stuff. He's an amazing partner, and I'd like to turn it over to him now.
Hey, all right. Thank you very much for the pleasant introduction. Good day, all. Excuse me. I know some of you, and I thank all of you for all you do. And we got some good information coming your way. Valerie's given you some input about what's going on, some great points. As mentioned, I still am a FEMA reservist, but not on this assignment right here, right now. I'm representing San Diego VOAD. As mentioned, she and I have worked a lot of different disasters here in San Diego, because as you know, San Diego is part of the Republic of California, where we have our 4 seasons of rain, mudslides, earthquakes, and fires. So we keep very busy and very active together. So I've gained my emergency management training in the corporate world and have fine-tuned it over the years, thanks to working with wonderful people like you and Valerie. And so I worked with some of you, some of the presenters, and we've worked on establishing recovery groups for individuals here in California. And we'll learn about the resources to assist the recovery groups and how they should be set up. So we're looking at the slide here that talks about, we got the next slide now. Help me. There you go. Thank you. And so we've got the next slide, and it talks about setting up a recovery group. And the recovery groups are community groups. And we want to get organizations, people, resources that can help us, that can provide money, muscle, materials, the 3 M's. You've heard that one before. You want to get community-based organizations. You want to get government, emergency management groups, faith-based groups, and don't forget the civic groups like the animals, the elks, the lions, the all those other wonderful people, and of course faith-based. The volunteers can help with legal matters, grant writing, human resources, communications, marketing. You just bring all these people together and you set it up. But it's not that easy, because you want to make sure that people know you're there for the long run. That's why it's called long-term recovery group. And in order to be recognized by the National VOAD, which brings in some of its local partners and national partners, your recovery group needs a name, a board of directors, a mission statement, bylaws, and fiscal sponsor. So these are things that you should be looking at when you get established. So most of you are from an established group right now. So we're going to the next slide, and it talks about who makes up these recovery groups. This form here usually is passed out at the very first organizing meeting. You can go ahead and pass it out to the groups that are present and say, hey, can you help us with any of these different things here? Long-term recovery, funding, case management, etc. What resources of those 3 M's can they bring? Can they provide? Can they help with? And I mentioned government, and one thing you want to remember about them is your local government. They know about building permits and things like that. So don't leave people out. When you get this going, you want to get it, and you want to establish that individual recovery group. We're not doing a community recovery. We're doing long-term recovery group to get this community back on its feet. So looking at our next slide, we have this fancy diagram that shows basically what a recovery group looks like. Right in the center, you've got the board of directors. And what you do from that is you get all these different committees. These are examples of committees that would be set up for a recovery group. This is by no means telling you, you must have this. No. Your community, you decide what you want to do. But let's look at this. We have a board, we have various committees from this group, from this example, and we talk about finance, public relation, fundraising, not fundraising, fund. Something happened to the D, bless its heart. And then you also want to have case management, the most important part of a recovery group, case management. You want to have that committee. You want to have possibly community assessment, and you have some of the agencies that can help you with community assessment to find out what's needed out there, to get the client's information. Sometimes people are reluctant to register with FEMA, and you're probably going to hear about that because they don't like the government. You want to encourage them to get registered. because there's only a certain window of time that you can, and you want to get them to do that. Another important committee, once again, this is an example, crisis counseling, spiritual care. And that committee can also help the people on the committees, on that recovery group. They need help. I always usually end out my meetings with take care of yourself. Remember that, take care of yourself. Of course, you're going to need construction, you're going to need volunteers. So these are just examples of what they can do. It shows it can do and how we can work it. And this next slide that we're talking about talks about the structure. Once it is set up, once we need to do that, you need to construct and organize. You need to put it together correctly. So we talk about getting the community partners, the different groups that can help. We want the member organizations, the partners that come in and they can work together. And most of the time, it's volunteers from an organization. And this makes it very difficult for some because they have a full-time job at their organization, let's say the Salvation Army, but then they're also helping out with this recovery group and they're a volunteer to help. So they, they're doing two different things. So they know what they're going to do. They want to help. They're able to be there to help with nominating people, voting on bylaws and different things that we talk about. And they have to be a part of it. So you have these member organizations come in, you have the individuals representing those organizations, and that's a hard job. But you know what? They want to do it from that community and they want their community to rise up. Then you've got the structure of the chairs of the various committees who can approve things that are proposed to them. They can make sure that that money is handled properly. And one of the things that I mentioned in how they're recognized is getting a fiscal agent. Sometimes people say, well, can't we just become our own 501c3? Of course you can, but that takes time. And you don't have time. You want to get things going. So the majority of the time, you will get a group to get a fiscal agent that's going to take care of that money and make sure that they can get working and going. So these are the things that you're looking at. Then another part of that is your board of directors. They're there for advisory purposes, for fiduciary purposes, to help out. So this is really something you have to remember and look at and make sure that your recovery group is doing. In our next slide, we go back to that wonderful picture again, showing how these work. If you have on this example here, we have the recovery group with the various working committees. And so they then report to a steering committee who then goes to the board, and they go ahead and they will present what their findings are, how they are helping people. We're talking disaster case management. You've got the case management committee, these people that are working with the applicants to help them get back. They work with these individuals. They keep the names to themselves. They can't say, hey, Joe down the street needs this. We can't do that. We have to protect their privacy. So they will present a case number and say, hey, case number 6 needs blah, blah, blah. They bring it to the group discovers what they can do. But then again, the building committee may have some of what they need. So they work together, yet they have to get approval. They have to make sure that they are doing everything perfectly legal to help those individuals get back on their feet. So it's very important. And so this particular one that we're looking at is from an established recovery group here in Northern California. Here, I'm in Southern here in California. And so this is what they have set up. It's been working very well for them. So the steering committee reviews the work and proposals that will assist the recovery groups and the individuals. Recovery groups is a big working machine. It's hard, it's tough, but the end results is you're helping those individuals get back started into their new normal. So recovery groups, very vital, very important thing to do, but you gotta do it right, okay? So the overall goal is recovery. And we see this on this next slide. It talks about recovery. What are we going to do? We're going to do things to help those individuals, but we have to have things working properly. So once the group has an idea of what the functions it's going to do, what programs it'll undertake, they need to plan how they're going to do that. Big important part of that is administration. And so, wow, we've got this group going, but how are we going to get that money done? How are we going to handle the meetings? How are we going to handle the meeting minutes? How are we going to let people know what we're doing? How are we going to get the word out that we've got a recovery group there for this community? That's administration. And one of the things you have to look at when you get this group set up is getting administration set up, support services. Now, most of the times, it's volunteers that will come in from the various groups, from the community, and they will say, hey, you know, I can help out by taking minutes, by sending out notes, by contacting this person or that person. But you have to figure, okay, I need you there. Can you help me out? So what we have been seeing lately is we're getting some of the groups that get paid staff or that will go ahead and run that. But that doesn't always happen. That's a big wish, a big if. Sometimes you can get paid staff to run your administration. If you can, that's an ultimate plus. So think about that. But it doesn't always happen. I'm being honest with y'all. Okay. Sometimes there just isn't funding there, but I'm planting the seed to y'all to be looking to if you're establishing a recovery group, finding a way to get paid staff to be your administration. Once again, I'm not telling you that it is something you have to do. It's something that you can look to doing because you don't always get a paid staff, but you need administration. You need communications management, working with your partners, information management and community relations outreach. You need office management. You need to bring in supplies. You need to get things. You need to go out and look at some of these national BOAD partners if you are established and say, hey, have you got some seed money you can send us to help us out? And they may, but have to make sure that you're established. And I mentioned the 5 things earlier of what will be recognized as an established recovery group. So yeah, working together, that whole community is going to be done. It can be done. I said it was hard. Yes, it is. It can be done though. I've helped set up recovery groups all over the states and territories. The communities see the need, they make it happen, okay? It's their community. They want to rebuild, they want to recover, and they will do it. So with that, I'm going to go back to the lovely and talented Valerie Brown and have her continue. And I understand we'll do questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So this slide is just the long-term recovery guide, quick reference. We'll make sure you have that as a reference for you in case you haven't seen it before. I'm going to move us along quickly here. Sample missions. These are just examples of what several long-term recovery groups in our communities have come up with and how they frame their work. And then we're going to switch gears and talk about learning from other communities. Going to very quickly just get the highlights of Santa Cruz. We formed a long-term recovery group in the aftermath of the 2020 CZU fire caused by lightning strikes at the beach. Burned into 3 communities there, Boulder Creek, Bonnie Doon, and the Davenport Last Chance area. This is our mission statement. this is how we've structured, so that example John showed you, this is how we have structured the organizations participating, what they'll do, and kind of what that looks like. This is very important to us in that it identified the gaps that we needed to fill in the community. So if we didn't have a resource in our community, we reached out to the state VOAT, to Jim Huey, and asked for partners. I talked to our state VAL and our FEMA VAL to say, you know, who can we bring in to help us meet this need in our community? And with that being said, and I know I've run over, Adam, I'd like to turn it over to you. And Adam was co-chair of Rebuilding Our Community, ROC, in Sonoma County, and formed in response to the 2017 wildfires that ravaged this community. And Adam, I don't know if you want to share your screen or.
I do. Can you guys see that?
I'm going to stop sharing mine now. Here we go.
Is that showing?
Yes.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much. I just think what we're doing today and tomorrow is incredibly valuable. I know we've got a full agenda with a lot of great presenters who I respect and have had my own work enriched by. So I will kind of move quickly. It was my privilege and responsibility to co-chair ROC Sonoma County. It's one of these long-term recovery groups that, similar to what Valerie just shared with Santa Cruz and what John was sharing earlier. In fact, John helped us in our formation process. Let me see if I can get to the next, stop sharing for a second and try and share again. If I can get here to presenter mode. There we go. So just quickly, this was the 2017 Sonoma County fires. We actually did expand in to help with 2019. One of the reasons why I just share this is we always have to remember why we're doing the work that we're doing, especially as John and others have mentioned. Long-term recovery is long. It's a marathon. And one of the things that's really important is that we don't drift in our mission or our focus in terms of what we're about. They're in point 4, just as a point of interest for communities that you might be working with. We had over 16,000 people respond to the LAC there in Sonoma County. We ended up with 1,225 clients for our long-term recovery work. When you're doing disaster case management, you're not helping everybody who is impacted by the fire necessarily. Although being impacted by the disaster is definitely a part of the work. Usually, in talking to FEMA, they'll estimate somewhere around 10% of those who might sign up at the LAC end up as clients in disaster case management. We had about 8% from 2017, around 8% from 2019, and around 8% from our 2020. We've done 3 long-term recoveries in the last 5 years, not counting COVID. And so as a framework in disaster case management, you're often working with the most vulnerable fire survivors. And from our experience, that's how it's turned out. Again, here is our mission statement. As John said, we used a fiscal agent for timing, and because we had a very clear mission in terms of response to the 2017, the specific fires. Quick overview, just point 1, we had about 45 nonprofit, philanthropic, and faith-based organizations who were responding in partnership with our federal, state, and County of Sonoma government. And as I mentioned, you see on point 3, we had 1,225 clients. I'm really grateful to say that we were able to close every case. And, that is in largest part due to the incredible work of our disaster case managers and the great support we got through the DCMP. So let me just quickly just go over 4 lessons. And this is tailored towards disaster case management, but not limited to it. We're looking at our overall work. First, stealing shamelessly. We are all in this together. It's part of why we're doing this meeting today and tomorrow, is the fact that we really do want best practices. We really do want to work together, and so we benefited greatly from the work of other communities, especially as we're getting started. In fact, that phrase "steal shamelessly," I have stolen shamelessly from John Chavez. So second, remember your mission, keeping fire survivors at the center. This is huge for disaster case management, especially over the long haul. We would often start a meeting not only remembering our mission statement, but remembering what our community had suffered. And as disaster case managers, that you're pulled in some interesting ways because you're reporting for the DCMP work, which is so important to be responsible for the funds that have been entrusted to us for recovery. But we're also trying to look towards our fire survivors. And so remembering their story, remembering that our work is not just to fix a problem or finish a task, but also to help them in getting home. It's part of their healing process. And so really paying attention to how you're doing in that work. And I know Cynthia Collinson, we'll talk a little bit later, is really key. And it's really remembering the mission that helps us cross the finish line in the way that we're talking about. Thirdly, honoring your work. It was already shared earlier, but I would just say from Sonoma County, disaster case management is the engine of long-term recovery. We had lots of committees, but really most of them were designed to come alongside disaster case management in helping the clients to their recovery plan. And so, that's really huge, very significant. But with that, you have to understand your work is really important. So practically, if you don't fill out, in our case at least, and I know things change from community to community, but we had a high standard for data and reporting. So if a disaster case management didn't get all the information they needed to get to fill out the former report, we couldn't include that information in our data reports. We couldn't then use that report to tell our story. We couldn't tell our story to raise funds. And so literally just the little boxes that you check, the information that you gather can translate to the important work of raising money that can then be used to help get fire survivors home. And so it really does matter. And I know for some organizations that means, filling out 2 different forms for the same information, but just remembering how that connects and how important that is. Finally, collaboration is essential for us. Our disaster case management DMC program involved 4 different organizations doing disaster case management. We had Catholic Charities, we had Community Action Partnership of Sonoma County, Jewish Family and Children's Services, and Suchi. So grateful for the work that they did. Collaboration is hard. Communication across agency is hard. It was absolutely essential. And it's part of the community strengthening and healing process as well, when we can come together, whether it's across disaster case management or across committees. And again, disaster case management is at the hub of helping that collaboration work. So I would love to say so much more, but I know that others after me will probably say it better. Thank you for the opportunity just to share a little bit of our story from Sonoma County, and I'll turn it over to who's next.
Bruce, thank you. Thank you so much, Adam.
Hi, this is Bruce Yearman. I'm with the Campfire, and I'm the director of the long-term recovery group here. I'm going to drop my email in the chat because if there are questions, I'm not going to be around for them. One of our volunteer agencies are dedicating 2 homes, one this morning, right now, and one this later this morning, and I want to run up and see that. But I would say amen to everything that's been shared, and it's going to be almost like we got together and planned this, because I can follow John and Adam and share a little bit of new information while underlining everything that they've said here. So I'm going to share my screen here briefly and just give you a little bit of background into the Campfire. And I'm assuming you can all see that.
Yes.
And I want to share, I could talk for an hour, but we've got about 10 minutes, and I want to share 2 best practices specifically with disaster case management. All right. So we're in Butte County, a bit further north than many of you. Considered a rural county, although when you get into Chico and Paradise, we're small communities. Small by Southern California standards, but over 100,000 in Chico, and the Ridge where Paradise was had about 50,000, about 30,000 of those in the town. So thriving communities at the time. But pre-fire, these communities really had a lot to deal with. And so now, post-disaster, disaster case managers are dealing with all of these issues, as well as the overlay of what a disaster can do to a community, especially a disaster this large. And so it was November 8th, 2018. I'm from Paradise. I'm one of those that evacuated, one of those that lost his home, woke up to embers falling from the sky, and everybody's got a story of leaving on that day. You know, and at this time, that number of acreage just seemed enormous, but we've also had 2 other fires in subsequent years touch the Camp Fire burn scar area, the latest being the Dixie Fire that burned over 1 million acres. And but what's still, just to give you a scope of how large this disaster is, I think if you take all of the fires since 2018, and that would include California, Oregon, now New Mexico, Texas, Colorado, and you take the number of structures that were lost, it still may not equal the nearly 19,000 structures and 15,000 homes that were lost here. And so on that, we had the formation of the long-term recovery group. And this is what a traditional long-term recovery group would look like, pretty much the same that John shared with you. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and share with you a couple of best practices as we look at disaster case management. So soon after the fire, you can imagine there were thousands that evacuated and thousands that lost their home. And very early on, there were 8,000 in the waiting list, 8,000 households in the waiting list for disaster case management. Now, FEMA funding, I think, helped with about 26 disaster case managers. But the community pulled together, and we were able to pull together over 100 disaster case managers. And there are some long-term recovery groups where, they look at a half a dozen FEMA-funded disaster case managers, or maybe no FEMA-funded disaster case managers. And I guess what I want to get across is, regardless of how many resources came to the Camp Fire and its long-term recovery group, it was far from what is needed, very, very far. And having some resources helps tremendously, but making up the difference still relies upon the community. And the heart and soul of what the long-term recovery group is are 2 things: the disaster case management and the unmet needs roundtable, where disaster case managers bring cases that need help. Those 8,000, eventually there were over 100 disaster case managers. A group of those were assigned to calling those 8,000 households, and about 1,500 went into disaster case management. And that number was reduced to where we are now, with about 250. Now, that's not the same from the same 1,500. We're receiving new disaster case management requests every week. We receive about 5 a week, even 4 years into the disaster. There are people out there that we are finding that are still living in sheds, not necessarily in the town of Paradise, but in some of the county and more rural areas. And there are many that are living in trailers, whether that be in the town of Paradise or in surrounding areas. that code enforcement is now saying you need to make a change. So what happens in a disaster like this is the city and the county will make exceptions to their rules of camping or living on a trailer, and eventually they need to get back into some sort of permanent housing situation. And 4 years into the disaster, those exceptions to those rules are sunsetting. So here's one of the things that we have learned with disaster case managers. Disaster case management, we now have about 12 disaster case managers with 3 agencies. Each disaster case manager has about 20 to 25 in their portfolio. Disaster case managers are now traveling with code enforcement in the town of Paradise and Butte County. It's not really good cop, bad cop. Hopefully they're 2 good cops, but you could think of code enforcement having to go and give the bad news, you really need to make some movement here by this date, but here's somebody that can help you. Here's the disaster case manager. And so these are people that may or may not have been in disaster case management in the past, but they just have not made appropriate movement. And then disaster case management will do the intake, look at their story. And I would say 90% of what disaster case managers are able to do is with help that already exists within the community. Whether that might be, those are agencies. It could be everything from United Way to Habitat for Humanity to some of those working with homeless or unhoused situations. But there's about 10% that really, there isn't anything that can be done for them. And so that's when the cases then come before the unmet needs roundtables. And we have 2 unmet needs roundtables. We have one that meets weekly, and those are for cases requesting just under $15,000, and one that meets monthly for cases over $15,000. And that's called the complex. And that's where we have most of our donors. And those would tend to be faith-based organizations as well as some other nonprofits. And so being proactive, looking for cases is one of our best practices. The other one that I wanted to share quickly is we meet with disaster case supervisors weekly in what we call a creative collaboration. Some of these cases are just so challenging and so difficult that they don't have a clear pathway forward. And with a couple of representatives from the long-term recovery group, plus disaster case management supervisors from the 3 organizations, we sit down and we say, what do you want to talk about this week? And that group helps each other with, have you tried this? Have you thought about this? I've seen that obstacle before. Wow, that's a new one. I find it does at least 2 things. One is it can provide a creative solution to a difficult problem, but the other is it provides support for the disaster case managers or their supervisors who are trying to deal with this. I mean, it's just a really hard job sometimes. I feel that the group of disaster case managers that we currently have, and some of those that have moved to other disasters, I say have a PhD in experience. They're helping rebuild homes. They're helping deal with permitting processes. Sometimes, although not disaster related, they're having to help clients or survivors maybe with substance abuse and where to get help for those kinds of things. They're connecting people with financial literacy. For a long time, it was some of the basic needs like food and shelter in a place where there's very, very little shelter, extra shelter to be had. But those are some of the best practices that we've sort of leaned into. We'll be here for at least another 2 years. think disaster case management will be here for at least another 2 years, and I don't think we're going to be done. I just don't know what's going to happen after those 2 years. We may extend, but we'll be 6 years into the disaster. And as I shared, new clients coming forward every week. So I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I'm going to invite Ann Watley and Heidi to come up and speak about the Ventura wildfires and their efforts.
Thanks. Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, you are good.
Okay, excellent. I'm gonna share my screen here real quick. I've got a couple quick points. But for those who don't know, Ventura is between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. We're about 850,000 in the county, and we're a mix of have a lot of agriculture and then also some larger cities, and we were impacted by the Thomas fire in 2017, and then also the Woolsey fire in 2018, and it hit both cities. There were over 1,000 homes that were lost in the city of Ventura, and then also a fair number in more rural areas of the county. So hold on, I gotta share the screen. There it is. Okay, so real quick, I think as everyone before was saying, I concur with so much, so we'll just hit on the highlights. And I want to mention Heidi Amundsen, who is one of our 5 disaster case managers, is also on the line with me. And so I figured who better to talk about case management than a case manager. Here we wanted to emphasize everything that people have said around collaboration, that we are really trying to operate as a network, and so and that's all about connecting the dots from all the different partners and the work that they're doing, from local to national partners, and then have organized in the same kind of structure that you've seen others talk about in terms of committees, but want to make sure there's a lot of connective tissue between those. And so, as others have talked about, really trust building is a huge component of the work, and in particular around the making sure that case managers know what all the different partners can offer. And that's something that we've found is that needing to repeatedly give the case managers updates on what different partners and how they can support. And also being real about the timelines for recovery. This was something that we had to continually revisit, that we're 4 years out from the Thomas fire, and we are still, working with cases. The pandemic in particular has slowed things down, but that the timeline that so many survivors had for how long they thought before they'd be in their home has many times been double what they were initially told. And a lot of the federal programs that have been developed to support the rebuilding efforts are, Recover California or the California Homes, they're just kicking off now with some supports, and that's 4 years post-fire. So you hear about a lot, but just trying to set expectations around the timelines. So I think a lot of people have already talked about centralized data collection and how important that is. And I loved the example that was just given around the creative conversations and providing a forum for disaster case management, all the different folks to talk to each other. We had 5 DCMs here and 1 Spanish speaking, and that's an important element for us. Heidi, do you want to talk a bit about the proactive case management and what that looked like?
Sure. I think it's, can everybody hear me? Just give me a thumbs up.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, in looking at when you first start out disaster case management, there has to be this collaboration and trust building and honesty amongst each of the different service providers, particularly if the DCMs are coming from different agencies. I think that what you're dealing with in Northern California, it's one agency hiring all the DCMs, but it's important to be visible with survivors, be at events where survivors are getting multiple sources of information and resources, and make yourself known to build that relationship with them. It's a long-term relationship as well as long-term recovery. And I think being an active listener and really assessing what that particular family survivor's needs are is a key as well, and helping them to decipher what that need is, what is really their need right now in the process.
And one thing that I feel like we learned as we went along was about as we were developing our processes and systems to have simple explanations for survivors about what is the scope of services, what you can and can't help with, and have it, because many times you have to repeat that or provide them that information multiple times. So, and then I'm sure others have spoken about this, but communications with them in different formats and repeatedly, so that they know that you're there and that you'll continue to be there. We are also still in the last year have gotten people who thought that they were doing all right and now are coming forward saying that they need assistance.
And I just want to, yeah, okay, so the DCM specialties with knowledge of particular challenges and resources. So for our long-term recovery group, the disaster case managers, we knew like what agency was going to help renters, what agencies can work with those that are actually rebuilding, what are the different needs, and we made those all known, whatever the specialty was for the disaster case manager. For example, the Spanish speaking was really key in getting the services needed for that family. It wasn't a necessary duplication of services. It was just providing a service from a different agency, but then you're the DCM from a particular agency, if that makes sense.
Yes, because then they can, then you've got it. There's so much information to learn for disaster case managers. If they can really develop a real kind of competency and depth of knowledge on one topic, then everyone doesn't have to learn everything. Another way we tried to handle this, because a lot of the case managers that we had done case management in the past, but not necessarily rebuilding of homes. And so we got funding for a rebuild navigator. And so we found 2 retired contractors who were there to advise the DCMs as well as the unmet needs allocation table and survivors around, just helping them to look at, like, is this contract something that, what are the things to be aware of? Looking for creative solutions. So they worked in partnership with the case managers in working with survivors. I'm making a distinction between that and construction managers. These were people who did not do any work themselves. Our LTRG did not oversee any construction of homes. So we were more providing kind of an advisory role. We found that, and we never found a great resource for this, but it was something that we did work with a number of organizations around financial counseling. And then also this emotional wellness and emotional recovery and Val Brown has a lot of great examples from the work she's done around really building community for survivors as a kind of light touch work around emotional wellness, and then also can provide like an on-ramp for people to then know what are the other resources that are available to them in that way.
And also just addressing Anne about the emotional wellness, that it goes in waves, that, that there was initially a lot of funding for survivors groups, survivors counseling, but the survivors are too concerned about just physical need and other things that they weren't really able to grasp the need for emotional wellness. So that comes throughout the whole process. I mean, listen to Bruce from Campfire, that, they still need emotional help 4 years in, or maybe that's when they're going to start to be able to talk about their emotional needs. So just wanted to make that. And also with the Rebuild Navigator, it can't come too soon, because, the homes, the survivors are looking at the permitting process, they're talking to different contractors. We worked with families that came to us basically too late because they'd already spent money on, put money down on a manufactured home, decided that that company wasn't, fit for them. And so there was a loss of a lot of money for the homeowner because they didn't have somebody helping them understand how to rebuild a house. These people never wanted to build a house, never thought they would ever have to rebuild a house. And it's a process, and it's a lot understanding the county or city government requirements.
Great.
Thank you both for that. And I just put in the chat great points, Heidi, because that is so true.
Yep. So I just wanted to end on another thing that we tried to do. And I think as people have said, this is a lot of work. So celebrate the progress as you go. I think for those of us who are involved in the day-to-day, taking us take a step back and recognize that there's a lot that you are accomplishing with folks. There's progress, and acknowledging that both for the people doing the work and survivors, that we're all on a journey, but that each step is bringing you closer. So I would encourage folks to do that.
Well, and thank you both. And then my apologies for the delay. John and I took a little longer than we needed to when we bumped everybody. So we're going to take a break now. I'm going to pause the recording.
Okay, can I get a sound check? Am I too loud or too low? Can you hear me well?
You're good, Jackie.
Okay, hi everybody, my name is Jacqueline. I am a FEMA VAL Voluntary Agency Liaison for FEMA Region 9. So I wanted to first start by saying thank you for this invitation to allow us to speak. I want to acknowledge that I have at least I'm aware of 2 other colleagues on the call on the meeting who are going to be assisting as well. Kathleen Hinman, she goes by Kat. April Chan, she is on the line as well. And again, my name is Jacqueline. So give me just a second. I need to move something out of the way. All right. So I wanted to kind of clarify, and I asked a couple of times, I wanted to make sure that this presentation was geared towards not just people who have been doing this for a while, but for people who have been are new to this and maybe are receiving a lot of information, and it could be information overload. And so one of the areas that I wanted to cover within our 10 or 15 minutes is what is a FEMA VAL and what do we actually do? What do we cover? And so for those of you who do not know, FEMA Region 9 oversees federal emergency management for 150 tribal nations and the following states and territories. So you can see that California is, yes, one of the states that we cover, but we have a lot of other areas that we cover as well. My purpose in sharing that with you, especially those of you who are new, because some of the questions we get sometimes is, is a FEMA VAL available for this or for that? And I want to acknowledge that in Region 9 at present, we have 2 FEMA VALs on staff full-time. That is myself, and then you have the regional VAL, who is Charles Craig. And so Charles Craig and I cover these areas, which means we could be tasked to these areas. I have some accountability and responsibility to these areas, but also it is important to know, as you all know, with FEMA, we could be tasked to do other things. We are called emergency management specialists. I'm having a little trouble with my screen. Valerie Brown, is everything looking okay from your end?
Yes, we see the presentation where you're listing slide 2. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go forward. Thank you. The next, and also my John Chavez, John and I worked together, and he helped to support me and kind of show me the ways of a VAL. And so I want to acknowledge him as a very important person to the FEMA team. I myself also had an experience working as a reservist. And for those of you who do not know what that means, reservists can come in and work and be assigned or attached to a particular assignment or disaster for a period of time. Some people have full-time jobs. I worked for 4 weeks as a FEMA reservist, but I had a full-time job, so I was only able to do it for 4 weeks. So you have, again, 2 full-time VALs for this region, and then thank goodness, FEMA is able to bring on excellent people and experienced people like John to come in and work when it's needed. So what does a FEMA VAL do? Sometimes I have found we kind of just pop into meetings and we just say, hi, I'm a FEMA VAL. People don't really know what in the world does that mean. So I have underlined some of the most important parts of all of these words for you. And mostly what we do is collaborate, communicate, coordinate, and cooperate. We provide information, we provide referrals to disaster survivors, we support the coordination of donated resources, we provide guidance, we coordinate whole of government engagement, we elevate and address. In addition to this, it is very important to note that we also work in support of the state. So our state counterpart for California is, of course, Valerie. And I know she is on this call. And so a lot of what you will hear us doing sometimes is say, we have to check with our state counterpart if the state requests X, Y, and Z. So for myself, for example, when I started working DR 4610, which is the Dixie Fire, that was in coordination and collaboration with the state, my counterpart, which is Valerie. I've mentioned here what FEMA VALs do, the 4 Cs. I think a few other people talked about it. I'm going to go forward, but these are really the 4 main areas that we as voluntary agency liaisons and just people in general working in disaster response or recovery should really focus on. We have to work together in order to get it done. So I'm not going to go into too much depth in the declaration process. I do want people to know that the information provided in this PowerPoint is also on FEMA.gov or is in several other places. So I just wanted to kind of point out the declaration process for people because I'm often asked, and I wanted to give particularly those new people who have not been in a session like this before an opportunity to kind of see all of the different steps that go into the declaration process. So why is this even important? This is important because you want to know, or we talk about in emergency management, we mention things like, oh, it's a major disaster, or we'll say things, oh, it's an emergency declaration, where if you're new to the field, you don't know what that means. So just for purposes of time and for brevity, emergency declaration, I've highlighted the areas. The president can declare an emergency for any occasion or instance when the president determines federal assistance is needed. A major disaster declaration will provide and open up opportunities for different programs. And so we're going to talk about that. There's no need to kind of gulp all this information in, but we're going to talk about the different steps. Emergency declaration. So I work in individual assistance. There are so many different departments within such a large agency such as FEMA. It may be difficult for people to know that, for example, when you see a FEMA person show up in a meeting, if you don't know them and haven't worked with them for a while, you're like, well, you should know everything about all of these things. You work in this, this, and this, and that's not actually the case. Yes, we are responsible as emergency management specialists, but I work and April works in individual assistance. There are staff who work in public assistance. And why you need to know that is only because what other people have shared in this meeting is how important it is to, you don't have to know everything. You really have to just kind of know who to connect to and with to connect you to and with the right person. It would be impossible for anybody new or even 3 or 4 years in to kind of know everything about a huge organization. So just kind of know that April and I work in individual assistance. Now, major disaster declaration. So this is kind of where you're going to see under what we call IA is individual assistance. And you see under that, assistance may include. May is a very important word. That's why I underlined this, because may include is key. You won't find too many people who will absolutely guarantee something will be included. It all depends on the declaration and what programs have been approved. So we're talking about disaster case management. I want to take 1 minute to say thank you to the disaster case managers. I myself have worked as a case manager, and I've also worked as a disaster case manager. And I want to appreciate the hard work that you do. It is good work, and I just want to take time to say thank you for that. Under, you see public assistance, hazard mitigation, and IA, individual assistance. So under a major declaration, certain things can be approved or authorized. And so right now we're in the disaster case management meeting. So I'm gonna go forward. I want to take about 1 minute or 2 minutes left, and then I'm going to turn things over to one of my colleagues. But I wanted to kind of clarify for people. We emergency talking people, sometimes we just say, oh, it's just a sequence of delivery. Well, what does that mean to somebody who is brand new? Or what does that mean to a survivor? It can be so complex. So if you see this little maze up here, it's almost like we're saying to people, hey, you're in the middle of crisis. Now figure out all of these boxes and where to go and when to go. This little number down here, when you're in crisis, you don't really have the capacity to really figure out that, hey, if I just add 10, I can keep going. We need to try to make it as simple as possible for people. And that is what we're trying to do. So why? What is the purpose of having this thing called the sequence of delivery? Well, it establishes the order in which disaster relief agencies and organizations provide assistance. It provides assistance to disaster survivors, and most importantly, it prevents duplication of benefits. It maximizes available resources, and it organizes efforts. And that's the key thing. After a disaster, most of you know, there are limited resources. And so it's very challenging when you have people kind of get the same resources from different agencies. So you want to maximize your resource, and we want to make sure there's no duplication. So how do you get from here, which is, devastation, to here, which is a rebuild? Who do I see? What do I do? When do I do it? Where do I go? And why am I having to fill out a different form, right? So if we're thinking about it from the disaster survivor standpoint, not from those of us who've been in emergency management for a while, we really, really want to think about, I'm going to go back. We really want to think about this thing called sequence of delivery. So this is a diagram. I can't tell if you can see it widely enough or not. Valerie Brown, is this okay? Can you see it well?
It's visible enough, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to show this flow chart, and then I'm going to break it down. I'm not going to go over our time either. So as you see, this is what's called the sequence of delivery. So you're going to start up here at the top, and you're going to work your way down to the bottom. But you want to break it down for the survivors. So I'm going to go through this really quickly, and then I'm going to break it down. So what's the first thing that you're going to do that happens after a fire? At the top, you're going to see, hey, those voluntary agencies and mass care, they're going to get busy doing emergency food, shelter, clothing, medical needs. Shelter also includes our pets because they are our family members too. What about those people who have some people, yes, right? They have insurance. Now they may be underinsured, but yes, they have insurance. So we definitely want you to start here at the top. So I'm going to go down. All right. So if I tried to put my mindset in the step of someone who had no emergency management training. What's the first thing? I'm going to contact my insurance provider. Also, I might reach out to voluntary agencies. And the reason I say might is because I actually might be somebody who has resources and I don't have to go to the voluntary agencies, and the voluntary agencies can maximize their resources for people who don't have any other resource. So it is at the top, contact your insurance provider or voluntary agencies. And then depending on the presidential declaration, it will open up those different categories of assistance. So we ask people register for FEMA. And how do you do that? You can do that by phone, you can do that on the app, and you can do that through disasterassistance.gov. So yes, we are aware that there are some challenges. Some people might not have a smartphone, cannot download the app. Some people might not have a laptop or Wi-Fi. But that's when all of these agencies come together and really, really help out our most vulnerable people or people who don't have access, or you're in an area where the Wi-Fi is down. So step 2, we want people to register for FEMA. Sometimes people think if I just call a voluntary agency, then I'm registered for FEMA. That's not the case. You have to the survivor actually has to register for FEMA and get the FEMA ID number. That's very important. Then step 3, apply for an SBA disaster loan if referred. So one of the questions that I would ask is, I'm already in crisis. Why in the world would I apply for a loan? And I'm in crisis. However, this is part of the process. SBA, they do have disaster loans. And I know somebody from SBA is going to speak later. I will defer to the SBA for that, but that is part of the process. If someone is referred and they do not apply, that is their choice as an individual. But if a person is referred to SBA to apply and they do not, that will stop them from moving forward in the process. And what is the process? The next thing, step 4, is figuring out whether a person is eligible for what's called other needs assistance. Some of that is dependent on that SBA application, and some of it is not. And then I'm gonna briefly go over that. And then at the end, contact your voluntary agencies, work with your long-term recovery groups. We've covered that. So let me break it down a few more minutes. I think, Valerie, I may be a little over time, but I'm going to quickly move. All right, so we talked about voluntary agencies. Basically, what I wanted you to see here was that they just do what they do. They provide food, clothing, shelter. You have your American Red Cross, Salvation Army, your faith-based organizations, your neighborhood partnership networks. They get busy doing the work that they do so excellently. We have within FEMA what's called Individual and Households Program. We refer to it as IHP. IHP will never, ever be enough to cover every single thing that a person has lost. And guess what? It's not intended to, but it is intended to provide some assistance. And that's why you'll see the word assistance. So there's 2 categories, housing assistance and other needs assistance. So when we talk about housing assistance, we're talking about there's two ways to do that. There's financial and direct. Basically, financial is funds provided to eligible applicants for temporary lodging expenses, rental of temporary housing, repair, replacement. Direct assistance is what you think of when you're thinking about, people often refer to the trailers or the units or the housing units. So again, the key thing is may. The reason I keep saying that is because every particular situation is different. Everybody's case is different. And there's no way to guarantee what is actually going to be declared at any given time. But these are the 2 forms of housing assistance. When we talked about ONA or ONA, other needs assistance, I mentioned non-SBA dependent and SBA dependent. No need to remember all of this. It's in our program guide and it will also be in the slides. But basically this means this is not dependent on a person applying for the SBA loan, all of these categories. And then you have categories that are dependent on a person applying for SBA. So again, I was asked to kind of cover the sequence of delivery. I know I've done that fairly quickly, but I hope that I've been able to break it down a little bit And then someone already talked about National VOAD, so I don't need to mention that. Someone already talked about long-term recovery groups. The only thing I would add to that is just making sure that all of the groups are equitable and that the representation on the boards and in the committees actually represent the people in the community who need help. And then we mention, or we talk about whole community. My purpose in bringing that up is because it absolutely takes individuals, families, faith-based community organizations, nonprofit groups, schools, academia, media, all levels of government. That includes the state, local, territorial, tribal, and federal partners. That includes everybody in the response. And I will not cover late applications and appeals for sake of time. We do have a FEMA helpline. I've covered steps for assistance. I just want to reiterate it for you. Sometimes if you hear things 3 times, it kind of sinks in. I want to add that disaster response starts. Remember at the top, it started with the voluntary agency. And guess what? It's going to end with the voluntary agencies. It's going to end local. It's going to start local. That's not going to be different per state. That's just reality. There's the chart again, and thank you. April, if I could, April or Kat, did you want to add anything? I know I'm right at our time limit.
Nothing particular to your presentation, Jacqueline. It was wonderfully covered. I do see that there's a question in the chat from Shama inquiring about what program specifically has been approved for 4610. So we'll just cover that really quickly. For 4610 specifically, the individual and household program has been approved. The registration deadline has passed. So currently, I believe our current registration is around the 2,000 range that has applied for FEMA. In terms of the other programs, the crisis counseling program was also approved for 4610, and I believe there will be a presentation about that later on today, along with the disaster legal services hotline, which from my understanding has concluded, and disaster unemployment assistance. Under IHP, they also have the direct housing program activated, which is where we temporarily house individuals in our travel trailer units or the manufactured housing units as well. And I hope that covered that question, Shama.
Yes, April, thank you.
So this is Kat, and I work with the disaster case management, and I work with the direct housing. So if there is any questions or anything information that I can provide, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in the chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, all 3 of you, yes. And we'll make sure that information is available. Do we have Nicole on here? There she is. Sorry, Nicole, we're pinching you, I know.
Yeah, so I don't have a presentation. I just wanted to speak informally to the group, a little bit about the Cal OES individual assistance role within disaster case management, and and be available to answer any questions. So my name is Nicole Benson. I am the Senior Emergency Services Coordinator within the Cal OES Individual Assistance Team, and I am also the main lead within Cal OES for these FEMA community services programs, including disaster case management, crisis counseling program, which you'll hear a little bit more about later, disaster legal services, these various services-oriented programs funded by our federal partners. So I just wanted to start by touching on some of the things that my FEMA partners mentioned earlier regarding the overall declaration process. So one of the main things that Cal OES individual assistance does is we work closely with our local government partners and our FEMA partners and other state agencies when a disaster happens to build that case to justify a FEMA individual assistance major disaster declaration. So working to understand what those damages are, what the local resources are, and basically painting that picture of what the outstanding unmet needs are that go beyond local and state capacity to bring in those additional resources from our federal partners. And as April mentioned before, for 4610, for the 6 counties declared under there, we brought in that full list of individual assistance programs, IHP, crisis counseling, DCM, of course, disaster legal services, disaster CalFresh, and those are all run by organizations and other state agencies outside of Cal OES. So because of that, one of the Cal OES individual assistance main roles in this is to provide that overall, view of all these different programs and how they interact with each other to support those disaster survivors, helping to make connections between the programs, making sure that each of the organizations or state agencies running them know about the other programs and vice versa, to be able to ensure that it is a whole community support and not just these piecemeal, okay, we have this here and that there and so on. But we provide, as Cal OES individual assistance, general support, oversight over these various programs, and including disaster case management, being that support and advocate for both our state agency partners, working closely to advocate for CDSS, as well as our local partners, since that is our one of our main stakeholders, is to support local government, to support community organizations who are the boots on the ground, knowing what those local needs are, knowing what those gaps are, and making sure that everybody's communicating and there's no and to at least help mitigate some any potential issues within communication, which we all know often happens within disaster response, disaster recovery. Let's see, what else did I want to mention? So yeah, that is basically our main role with this. You will see, representatives, mostly me from Cal OES individual assistant, stepping in on some of these meetings just for that general situational awareness, but also to as I said before, make sure that we can help make those connections with other organizations and with other programs that are going on. And so I'll just go ahead and stop there. As I said, I just wanted to be brief on our supporting role for disaster case management, and I'll absolutely be on for additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Val Mahatovich, we will queue you up.
Good morning. Yep, I changed my computer to standing. There we go. So it's easy for me because I get to follow all the best vals you'll ever know, and FEMA and Nicole and everybody else. So I'm basically what, as Jacqueline Chadwick said, they support Cal OES and the State Voluntary Agency Liaison. They cover Region 9, which is huge, and I just cover the state of California, so which is huge. And so I'll be here for the long haul. I'll be supporting your long-term recovery groups for the long haul until you manage every case and people return to some kind of new normal. So I typed my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions. You have any questions for Cal OES or others at the state, I'm happy to get it to the right person, get answers for you. And also, when FEMA is not able to make it our FEMA val, you can certainly direct those questions to me and I can get those to the FEMA val. Jacqueline is super responsive, but because she covers a large region, she can't be on all the meetings. The one thing I can say is all of you are different. All your communities are different. I've met most of you on Zoom, and all of you have different needs and different things going on. So we have the parameters and we support long-term recovery groups with all the various committees. And my one thing is to be flexible. You're going to evolve, you're going to adapt, and things are going to change, and that's okay. There's formulas that we all follow as long-term recovery groups, but your communities are all different and have different assets and different needs. So we recognize that. And a little bit about my past, most of you know, but I have not been with the state that long, but I have about 20 plus, almost 25 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. So I come from Sacramento Region VOAD, and I was the vice chair of NorCal VOAD. And so I know I am completely am in your shoes. I work for the state, but I'm in your shoes most of the time as well, because I've been there for so many years and I've worked with so many of the organizations that are helping. And it's an easy connect for me when you need help from outside. Hopefully my brain sometimes is like a 211. So I have that connection or the resource or whatever that can hopefully bring it to your communities. So please reach out to me for anything you need. I check my email all the time, and I'll do my best to get your answers, and I'll keep mine short because you guys also eloquently covered it before me. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'm happy to pass it on to our next person.
Thank you so much, Valerie. We've got Vance Taylor with state with us, and Vance, I don't know if you're up for starting a few minutes early. Sorry about that. I've got dogs in the background. They like to help my meetings.
Yeah, I've got dogs too, so they might just have a little dueling bark out session.
Yeah, I'm sure mine would gladly bark at anybody else's dog.
So I don't know if there's what size or breed of dog you have. I've got 2 dogs. Each of them are about maybe the size of a loaf of bread with legs. But when Amazon arrives at the door, you would think that they are massive, enormous, mighty dogs. And actually, for me, as annoying as it is when mine explode because they do it at the wrong time, it's kind of a reminder of, hey, that's how we got to be, right? We got to step up when it's our moment. And I think that message is very appropriate for this particular group, right? That this is our moment. So for those of you that don't know, I'll give you a little bit of background on who I am and what I do. Although I'm looking through the list of participants, I'm really happy to say that I know a lot of you already. But for those of you that I don't know, I'm glad to meet you, certainly virtually, and to support you in whatever way I can. I'm Vance Taylor. I'm the chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs at Cal OES, which is a very long title. My big joke is that it costs a fortune to print my business cards. They're also in Braille, so it's a lot of dots. I joke, but both those things are true. My role is essentially exists because historically, what we've seen is that as a nation, we haven't traditionally done a real great job when it comes to considering and addressing the needs of individuals with access and functional needs. And so a lot of times, we kind of get lost in that title, access and functional needs. What is that? Who is that? What's the definition? But let me just tell you that we're talking about individuals with disabilities, whether they're physical, intellectual, or developmental. We're also talking about older adults. We're talking about individuals who are transportation disadvantaged, economically depressed, institutionalized, old children, women in late stages of pregnancy, people whose primary language is English. And so when you take all those individual populations and you lay them over a map of California, you're talking about a lot of people. And the reason why we highlight those individual populations and put them under this umbrella of access and functional needs, and create an office specifically to look at working with those populations. It's because what we have found is that regardless of what disaster strikes, or when or where, the most disproportionately impacted individuals are people with access and functional needs. We see it every time without exception. We saw it during Katrina, where 70% of everyone who died had an access or functional need. We see it when, following a disaster, we set up shelters. The last people to leave are those that are hit the hardest, and they're people with access and functional needs. And so, recognizing that this is an issue, the governor leaned forward and created an Office of Access and Functional Needs. And I've been appointed as a senior level executive to brief the governor and the director on these issues, and to work in partnership with stakeholders in the community, emergency managers, and local jurisdictions to do really two things. One is to identify what are the needs that people have, all Californians have, before, during, and after disasters. And then secondly, to then integrate those needs throughout the emergency management process. And I think a lot of attention gets paid to the front end of that, right? When we plan, when we prepare, when we respond. We see it when we have things like accessible communication. And we share life-saving information through our community-based organizations. We share it in multiple languages. We utilize ASL interpreters. We try and use plain language, right? We try and make sure that life-saving information about disasters gets all the way to the individual. We see it when it comes to transportation and evacuation, that we're working to help ensure local jurisdictions have a plan in place to get people from danger areas and impact areas and into areas of safety, right? Which oftentimes is a shelter. And of course, at shelters, we want to make sure that there are inclusive wraparound services so everybody can have their needs met. And all that tends to get a lot of attention. But as more news cycles come and go, the TV cameras go away, and the press stories kind of start to thin out, what you're left with is a recovery. And for whatever reason, recovery just isn't sexy, right? So you don't get massive headlines about it. But recovery is the hardest part. It takes a long time to recover. It takes a long time to rebuild your life. And when we're talking about individuals with access and functional needs, we have to bear in mind that it becomes exponentially more difficult to get your life back. Because not only have you maybe lost everything, right, through no fault of your own, but you're dealing with things like, hey, I lived in one county and now I moved to a different county. And I don't know if my IHSS would transfer. I don't know, I used to live close to where my doctor's office is. And now I don't. So I don't get the same medical care that I used to. My care attendant used to come to my apartment, but they can't travel to where I am now. And so some people are languishing without adequate care. I used to be able to afford to live in a particular place, and now I can't. And so my safety is in jeopardy. Or there's a lack of accessible housing. And so now I'm living in an inaccessible location. Oh yeah. And on top of trying to get all my services transferred and restored, I'm also now having to do things like try and get my ID and trying to figure out just the day-to-day, documents that are necessary in order to live our lives. And so the stress and burden of that in and of itself is a true challenge for anyone, but particularly from someone that's dealing with all those other factors, right? Because you're dealing with a level of emotional and physical stress that's off the charts, and it's happening in a way, because of kind of the way that systems are set up, that people are forced to maintain that posture for extended periods of time. And it's not healthy. It's dangerous. It's why we see the number of suicides take a sharp uptick, not right after a disaster, but about a year after a disaster. Because it's about a year after that somebody figures, I've done all I can, and I'm still lost in the system. It's in those moments when hope becomes a genuine challenge. And so I look at long-term recovery groups, and I look at disaster case management programs, and I very much see you as the saving grace of it all, right? You're the one that sometimes literally, but always figuratively, takes someone by the hand and walks them through the process of becoming whole again. I know what it is to rely on other people. Okay, I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy when I was 7. I've used a wheelchair for almost all my life. I need help doing a lot of the physical things that most people take for granted. And I know what it is to have somebody not show up when they said they were going to. It's horrible. I've had it happen when I had a job interview. I've had it happen when my wife was 9 months pregnant. It is a terrible position to be in. And so your ability to become a consistent, reliable resource for people cannot be underestimated. It's not just about the resources you bring to the table. It's about the fact that you become the one thing maybe that they can rely on and depend on to do and follow up in the way that you say you're going to. And that consistency becomes, I think for a lot of people, a life vest that they need to avoid drowning in what can be a very turbulent sea of challenge. I remember when our second daughter, my wife went into labor with our second daughter, being terrified because even though we had planned, the hospital route and the go bag and all the stuff, it ended up that my wife went into labor fast and furious, and we lived in DC at the time, which is one of the worst traffic areas in the world. And it was at 8 a.m. during rush hour traffic. And we found ourselves stuck on the highway, nowhere to go. And I remember thinking, I could get out of this van and sit my wife on my lap and drive her to the hospital on my wheelchair faster than what we're doing right now. And I looked over and we saw that there was a police officer. And I asked the officer for a police escort to the hospital. And he said, and I quote, "Yeah, we don't really do that," and rolled his window up. And our hearts sank. And my wife's getting emotional and I'm getting emotional. And the only thing I can figure is that after a few moments, somehow the despair that we had in our van kind of oozed out of our vehicle and made its way into that squad car. Because for whatever reason, he changed his mind. He rolled the window back down and said, "I'm going to turn on my lights, stay on my tail. Right, we're going to get you there." And the next thing we're bombing our way through traffic, which I'll say as a side note was exhilarating. If you ever get a chance to get a police escort, you got to do that. I told my wife, "Thank you so much for this opportunity." She was not as excited as I was at the time. So we pull up to the hospital and the officer took off. I don't know his name. I never got to shake his hand. I never even got to say thank you. But we went into that hospital and literally moments later, our daughter was born. Now she just turned 15, and every year on her birthday, she wants the same thing. Tell me the story, right? So I tell her the story. And I'm looking at her and I started getting emotional because I'm looking at this smart, capable, independent, this beautiful young woman. And, you can't help but wonder, what tale would I tell had it not been for the right person at the right time in the exact moment of our lives when we needed them most? And so I share that with you because I want you to understand that for the individuals who are trying to get their lives back together, the people that you're helping, for them, you will undoubtedly be the right person at the right time at the exact moment when they need someone the most. So I want to thank you for the work you do. I want to thank you for taking time to stop and lift another. And I want to commit to support you in any way I can. If you reach out, I'm easy to get a hold of. I will be responsive. You lift and I'll lift. And together those communities will ascend. So thank you for letting me spend a few minutes with you, and I'll turn the time back over.
Well, Vance, thank you for that. I want to just piggyback on what Vance is saying. My fire was in 2007, and it was it's before Vance's office existed, and it was a hot mess. And we had folks with dementia who were evacuated to a stadium so their families couldn't sleep. There's no consideration. We had people who were in wheelchairs and our elderly with hip issues who couldn't get into, at the time, Red Cross had a different type of cot. We did not have Braille available. We did not have American Sign Language. It was just not baked into the program. And it was just incredibly frustrating on so many levels, you know, at the city level, the county level, the state, the national level with Red Cross. And while a lot of those things feel like they've been handled, you know, just be aware they're not baked in. You know, you have to advocate for your community. And if you don't, these people are not going to be part of the recovery. They're going to get left behind. And it's on you to make sure it happens. And if you don't know that resource, please take advantage of Vance and ask him. He will connect you. You know, he's fierce advocate here. And, you know, it flows so much into everyday life. You know, this is not just about disaster. These improvements we make in our community post-disaster should be continued in our day-to-day life going forward. So I highly encourage you to reach out to him. Thank you so much for Vance. I know I drag you into any meeting I possibly can because I don't think enough people hear it or think about it. And if you're not in a position to see it in action, you know, it's invisible to you and to government, and you know, and so opportunities like this are where we float everybody's boat, right? And Vance, I don't know if you're able to stay for the Q&A, so I wanted to give people an opportunity to ask you a question since we gained 5 minutes.
Sure.
So any specific questions for Vance here?
And if there aren't any now, that's okay. You can always just email me and get a hold of me later. Please feel free to put my contact info.
I will. I'm going to just full disclosure to everybody. You're going to get an updated agenda as a constant contact that has links and PDFs and email addresses. So
okay,
you
great.
Just have one place to go to with all of that. All right. Let me see. I think we had a question. No, we've got a lot of thank yous in the chat for you, Vance. So thank you.
I have my hand up.
Oh, so sorry. I missed the hand.
So Vance, this is Annie Barber, and I worked for United Policyholders. I'm also a 2017 Tubbs Fire survivor. I was very touched by everything you said. I really needed to hear the entire educational piece and all of the challenges that able-bodied people do not think about. And I so appreciate the work that you're doing and that you're willing to have this talk with us so that we can continue the work that you're doing in our small parts of the world. So thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Annie. Appreciate it.
All right. With there being no further questions, hold on. There's 4 screens here. I have to thumb through to make sure I've got no more hands raised. No more hands raised. Okay, so gone through everyone. We'll go ahead and give everyone a 10-minute break. You'll get a real 10-minute break. Thank you. Thank you all for your patience. And so please give yourself something to drink. If you need a snack, please do that. And we will pick back up at 11, roughly 11:35, 11:40. And so let's just plan. So let's plan 11:40. So you've got 12 minutes, all right? Just so that we start on time with Roxanne. And I'm gonna pause the recording. I'm gonna stop it and go into call. Right, Kelly, go ahead and ask your question.
I just had a question, and I don't think Bruce is here anymore, but maybe somebody here has been involved with that. And he was talking about the creativity, the meetings that they had, the creative solutions with the DCMs. And I was wondering if anybody knows who else is involved in those meetings.
I can speak to someone who has borrowed shamelessly from what the work we did in camp. We have pulled in our mental health partners, so emotional support, mental health. We've pulled in different national VOADs, local partners, United Policyholders. I've sat in to do brainstorming for folks on getting people unstuck. We pulled in our building department for the permit center to say, hey, this process doesn't work for people. Can you fix it? It really is, it's kind of out of the box thinking. It's not traditional case coordination. When you think of typical social services, we're bringing those people into the room to figure out how we use them. We brought in a FEMA Val one time just to talk about the appeals process way back in the day on that piece. It's really very fluid. John, anything you want to add to that? Because I know we've lost our other community members.
Yes, I'm here. No, I have nothing to add at this time, but I'll field any question.
So it just goes more on a case by case basis if we're really stuck on getting a problem solved, and so let's bring in this group, this organization, these people. So it's not a regular meeting.
No,
group meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
We do it two ways. We do weekly meetings with our case managers for case conferencing, and then for unmet needs, we do like a presentation practice session. And sometimes in those meetings, we'll find we need a resource, so that we'll bring that to the next next meeting of the case managers. So, but I mean, it always gets back into that data drives everything, right? So you're looking at, you get the data. You're getting the feedback from your DCMs as they're working with the survivors, and then we're finding that we've got this issue, and everybody opens the Rolodex, digs in, and does that. Let's see, and Norma, I'm going to take your question, and then we've got Cole and Amber. They're on and ready to present, so we will pull them up, and then we will do Nicole. We're going to kind of go to the second half of our presentations for this time period and see if we can get our others on. So Norma, go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll get Cole and Amber, and then Nicole.
Hi, everyone. I just had a comment about the question about the meeting that Bruce mentioned. I actually worked campfire with Bruce prior to this disaster. So one of the meetings he mentioned was creative solutions. That was with supervisors and the construction cost analysts. So supervisors would talk to their DCMs about what cases needed extra assistance, and then they would present them to the other supervisors from partnering agencies. And then also we did case consultations, and that was with DCMs. There was a mediator, and then DCMs could bring cases forward to get feedback from the whole group.
Like that. Thank you for sharing that, Norma. And then,
so this is Kat.
Yes.
And I was just going to say, oh, there's all my preparedness stuff. If any agencies or group would like to have, trainings or a monthly meeting, I'm happy to set that up so that we can do that. So you can bring those situations that you think might be a benefit to everybody else, and covering things like the appeal process. One thing I worked with Plumas Rural Services. I don't know why I have trouble with that name, but on how to do the continuing temporary housing assistance application. That thing is a booger, and it's got to be just right, or you get a letter that's even more confusing than the letter you got the first time. So anytime that I can be of assistance with that, please reach out to me. I'm glad to work with you on those. It's much better that I train people ahead of time and not have to answer the same question 20 times.
Exactly. And I'll add that to the email I'm going to share. All right. Cole and Amber, I'm going to go ahead and queue you up. Nicole with SBA, you will be next after them. And if our others have joined us by then, we'll plug them in. If not, we'll keep going with our Q&A. Thank you so much, Cole.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. Good afternoon, all. My name's Cole Glenwright. I'm with Cal OES, the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, and I'm the Operations Section Chief for the state's recovery to these wildfires. I have a few slides to run through about the debris removal program, which is a program some of you may be familiar with. I think I gave this same presentation or a similar version of it last year to this group. but we'll hopefully give you some awareness of what all goes into the debris removal program. It's a program that touches a lot of survivors, and hopefully give you enough information to answer some questions about it, and give you a sense of kind of where we are in that and where we're going. I'm joined today by Amber Lane, who's one of our other senior project managers with the debris program, and she's overseeing our cleanup of the Caldor fire. So Amber, feel free to jump in, and certainly, add anything as we run through the slides here. So let me go ahead and share my screen if it's going to let me do this. All right. Is that showing up for everyone?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So the debris removal program is structured around 3 core objectives. The first is to protect public health and public safety. So we're principally removing fire debris and fire damaged trees that pose a threat to public health, whether that's an environmental threat, such as from asbestos or lead-based paint, heavy metals, things like that, or a more physical threat like trees falling on roads, cars, homes, things like that. Certainly a key kind of secondary objective is to assist survivors in rebuilding or reoccupying their property. In most cases, it's a linear path that the debris has to be removed before they can rebuild on that same lot. And then on a kind of broader scale, we do these programs in a holistic and community-wide approach to support that whole community recovery. So it's not one by one, insurance company by insurance company, so that it is as community-wide as can be. So there's a few different government agencies involved in the debris program, and you probably don't need to remember all the acronyms, but we just wanted to give you an overview of who all is involved so that if you're talking with survivors or other stakeholders, you can be somewhat assured that it's all really one program. As I mentioned, I'm with Cal OES. We're the lead agency for recovery here in California, and we're the lead agency on the debris removal program as well. For the debris program, we run our county by county operations really in partnership in a unified command fashion with the county governments. So be that, Plumas County and Lassen County for the Dixie Fire, El Dorado County for the Caldor Fire, and so on. Underneath Cal OES, under our authorities, we have the California Environmental Protection Agency, manages much of the work. Really 2 departments from there. The Department of Toxic Substances Control performs some of the front end work, the real hazardous materials work. All of that is complete at this point. And then Cal Recycle, which is the Department of Resource Recycling and Recovery, manages what we call the phase 2 work. And I'll run through both of those in a couple slides here. But importantly, all of these agencies are part of the same debris program, the State Consolidated Debris Removal Program. Of note, not on the chart here is FEMA. FEMA provides public assistance funding for a good majority of the work. And so if you hear folks referring to the FEMA debris removal program, that is this program. They're a stakeholder to this as well. Okay, just to run through kind of how we deliver our program here, and I'll note a lot of this is in the rearview mirror for us now, but we wanted to give you kind of an overview of the program in general, so you can answer questions about any of it. Phase 1 is the initial removal of household hazardous wastes and bulk asbestos. As I mentioned, that's led by our Department of Toxic Substances Control, and that's really an emergency response function that happens very quickly after the firefight, after any search and recovery operations. Of note, survivors don't have to do anything for that. They don't have to enroll, which is an important note as we move forward. But like I said, all that's done, that all wraps up usually a month to 3 months after the fire. Phase 2 is really all the rest. That's the heavy cleanup. It's the removal of the remaining structural debris, which when we say structural debris, we mean the remains, the rubble from the destroyed homes that were tragically lost in these fires. And eligible hazard trees, which are trees that are posing a threat to public roads or other public infrastructure. Again, from an organizational perspective, Cal OES and Cal Recycle, which is part of the EPA, we manage that together in coordination with counties. And all of the work, really for both phases, but certainly for phase 2, is done by specialized private contractors, environmental firms. And I don't have a comprehensive list of all the firms that we're working with on screen today. But it is, helpful to know who those folks are, so that if you talk with survivors and they're, interacting with one of our contractors, they can be assured those are legitimate folks. So be happy to provide that after. Some of the big names are Tetra Tech, ECC, Odin Construction, Anvil Builders, just to name a few. And we have a really good working relationship within Cal OES. So if you ever have a question about whether a debris contractor is legitimately associated with this program, feel free to pass that back to us here at Cal OES, and we can quickly validate that for you. Briefly, just kind of eligibility and enrollment. We're running this program across several counties. Really every major fire we had last year, we included in this. But it is important to note this program is not applicable to every wildland fire. It requires special approval from Cal OES and FEMA. So for folks that may have participated in it this year, it may not necessarily be the same program each time it's rolled out. It's primarily a residential cleanup program, as we mentioned, homes that were tragically destroyed. But in certain cases, it can include public parcels, things like fire stations, schools, libraries, and commercial parcels, buildings, or businesses rather. We're seeing this primarily up in the Dixie Fire, where, as you probably are aware, we lost really all of the community of Greenville, including that downtown area there. And so we've included a high number of commercial and public parcels there. Of note, property owners have to choose to opt into phase 2, and they do that through a right of entry permit. So that's a form that they execute. They provide some information about their insurance, if they had any insurance. They provide some essentially hold harmless indemnifications, things of that nature, and any information they'd like to about their property. They provide that back to their local government, their county, and then those are validated and transmitted to us. In phase 2, folks also have the option to do the cleanup themselves, which is a regulated cleanup through their local government, usually their county environmental management, environmental health department. We don't, encourage that option. That can be a pretty fiscally onerous route because there isn't public funding usually made available for that. But for some folks, if they were well insured or they're on a very short recovery time frame, it may make more sense for them to do the cleanup themselves with a private contractor as opposed to using the public cleanup. Again, just at a high level, kind of what we run through on a property. We do a series of assessments on each property to start. That's just to help understand the site conditions, any safety concerns. Once those pre-work assessments are done, we begin the actual heavy debris removal, which is where you'll see an excavator, a smaller skid steer, and a series of dump trucks servicing each property and removing all of that waste material. That usually takes anywhere between 1 to 3 days to do the actual removal. All the wraparound steps obviously take quite a bit longer. After the debris removal is done, we do a comprehensive analysis of the underlying soil to determine if there's any contaminants still in the soil that are a threat to public health. This is an important point to note because we are still doing this analysis on a number of properties. And it's common that survivors see that the heavy debris has been removed, that the tractors and trucks are gone, and they presume the work must be complete. That's not the case until they get that final notification from their county, which confirms that the soil analysis has come back as clear and the remaining steps have been done. It's very important they don't begin rebuilding or reoccupying the property until the county has approved them to do so. And as I mentioned, we do remove a select number of hazard trees under this program as well, those trees along the front of the property that could fall onto public roads. And that is ongoing as well, mostly wrapped up with that work at this point. Again, across the state, we're really approaching the finish line on the debris removal operation here. So hopefully a lot of this will be reference information and you won't get too many questions on it. But this is to, hopefully gives you a little overview of what we at the state and the survivors who have participated in this program have been going through for the past 6 to 8 months at this point. Okay, this is a great tool that we try and share every time. This is our debris removal dashboard, and this is a GIS product. It's available online at the link below. It does a couple things. As you can see kind of in the screen we have here, it shows you really at a high overview where we are on the project across the state. And you can filter that down to our operational divisions, to a county, or to different, fires. So you can get kind of a sense of the scope and scale of what we're working on this year, just shy of 2,000 properties that were affected by these wildfires and are being cleaned up through the program. And you can also, this is a screenshot, so I won't do it here, but you can also type in an individual address or parcel number or zoom to it on the map. And you can click in on that and you can see specifically where that property is in the program, what the status is. So if you're attempting to, find out where a survivor's property is in the debris removal program, all of that is public facing. You don't have to call anyone. You don't have to email anyone. You can just go to this dashboard, put in their address, and you'll see literally in real-time data. This system pulls on a 5-minute basis, every 5 minutes, direct from our operations center. So it is, quite frankly, usually more current than information even our teams have. So again, that's available at wildfirerecovery.caloes.ca.gov. Just click debris removal dashboard and that'll load on up for you. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other work we do still have ongoing. As I mentioned, most of our debris removal program, fortunately, is wrapped up at this point for the 2021 fires. We do have a couple somewhat significant operations still underway. The first is related to the Caldor fire, and that's related to some recreational residence or national forest cabins that were destroyed in that fire in El Dorado County in the El Dorado National Forest. Those are not generally eligible for debris removal, but because of the number of them and the threat that the debris from these cabins was posing to the rivers and watersheds up there, we did get a variance from FEMA, and we're including those in the program here. So because that took some negotiation with the federal government to get those included, it does mean we're starting on them quite a bit later than we are the rest of it. We are about to start on that work. But I did want to highlight this in case you are interacting with folks that have, are an owner of one of these cabins or associated with these cabins in some way, that work is a little sequence behind the rest of it and is about to get going. As I mentioned, Amber, who's on the line, is our project manager for the Caldor fire. So Amber, did you want to add anything else to this discussion?
No, I think you covered it. We will be starting next month, which is quickly approaching, a Tuesday, right after the holiday. We have done quite a bit of assessments up there, and we had great participation. So our goal this year was just to make sure that this was successful, because since it is the first time we have done cabins, and we're off to a good start. So I'm really happy with where we're at right now.
Great, thanks, Amber. As with everything with the debris program, if there are initial questions from survivors, we really encourage those to be directed to the county governments. As I mentioned, this is a unified effort with each county, and we really try and position them as the first line of inquiry, so that they can give that kind of locally focused answers. So if you have any questions about this effort specifically, I encourage you to talk to El Dorado County, and they can loop back with our team as necessary. Another effort that I wanted to highlight and put some awareness around is up in Plumas County in the community of Greenville. As I mentioned, Greenville was tragically, almost completely lost in the Dixie fire last year. And one of the interesting, I would submit, unfortunate findings of the debris removal cleanup is that there is a substantial amount of lead in the underlying soil, which is not believed to be related to the fire. It's believed to just be related to legacy conditions. But there is an effort underway with the California Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Toxic Substances Control to remove that contaminated soil from property owners who would like it removed at this juncture. Logically, it's a good time to do so before they begin rebuilding and pouring foundations. So at a high level, the program at no out-of-pocket cost for property owners who are in this select group that qualify, which is a small universe, but it's ones where the confirmation sampling for the debris removal program confirmed that they do have these contamination levels, can have soil removed and clean soil put back in. So again, if you have questions about that effort, which is somewhat nascent and still a bit under development, but I would encourage you to contact Plumas County, and we're closely working with them on that. Okay, and I think, one other item to highlight here is our property damage claim process. In rare and select cases, property is damaged during the debris removal program. This can include things like septic tanks, wells that are accidentally damaged by the heavy equipment working on the property, the dump trucks, etc. So if you come across a survivor who thinks they have experienced this, there is a process where they can submit a damage claim to us. The first on the left is the incident level damage claim. So this is a much shorter form that just goes directly to the field incident management teams managing the contractors day to day. And we really like to resolve as many claims as we can through that process because it's much faster. We can have contractor crews out there quite quickly to remedy any damage that may have been caused. So again, those forms are available through local government or through our incident management teams. And of note, it is not a broad process, right? A lot of the damage, if it's to things like driveways or whatnot, may be incidental and may not be covered under this program. But if it's an actual negligent action by a contractor, we'd encourage folks to file a claim. I think someone might be off mute there. And the second claim process, which is the claim process that's available to survivors after the incident management teams demobilize, after there's no longer contractors on the ground, is the general services claim, which is the process that's always in place to file a claim against the state of California. This is because it is a steady state program that accepts claims for really any reason. It's a bit more onerous to submit. It takes a little bit more time. There's a filing fee and a waiver to against that filing fee if you are so eligible. But that's available through the Department of General Services if you find a survivor who either wasn't happy with the remedy that the incident management team could provide, or becomes aware of the claim or wants to file a claim after that process is wrapped up. So again, very small numbers of folks that ever feel the need to file a claim. But for those folks that may have been inadvertently wronged by the debris removal program, we'd like to make that right. And so we encourage them to submit a claim now.
Hey,
And
Cole,
that
this
is-
is Susan Cantner from DSS. It looks like I was looking at the chat. There's a couple questions in the chat specific to debris removal. So I don't know if you guys wanted to answer those or.
Yeah, absolutely, Susan. I'll just wrap up and then I can get to those questions. And that really was our last slide here. So, of note, that's an email address that's generally monitored by us. I think we have a really good system working with Val and the voluntary agency liaison team to triage those questions and get them to the right folks. So we don't want to circumvent that. But if you have any general questions about debris removal, that debris task force at Cal OES email address is great. And again, just to stress, for incident specific questions, really your first point of contact for a survivor should be that county government. They're going to have the most holistic view, and they are, a bit more engaged on the specifics of it. But our team is always available as a backstop to help with that. And so with that, I guess I can pull up the chat here. Let me pull these slides down.
Yeah, and while you're getting ready to answer those questions,
Sure.
to throw out, I know we have some communities that weren't eligible for the debris removal program.
Mhm.
And again, as we started this with, if your community was not a FEMA declared disaster to be able to take advantage of this, now you've got the information, so the next time you have a disaster in your community, what that looks like. Because we find getting you information early helps everybody in the community make better decisions.
Definitely. Okay, and it looks like the questions start with if they opt out of phase 2, will they get their property back? Can they still rebuild on the property? So essentially with phase 2, there's 2 tracks. Either they submit the right of entry permit and our program cleans it up, or they work through a permitting process with their county government and with a private contractor clean up the debris. Ultimately, all property owners who are in the affected counties that have this disaster debris on their property are responsible to remove that debris in a lawful manner. It has to be lawfully disposed of in compliance with all the environmental regulations we have here in California. So one way or another, they need to do that phase 2 cleanup. And then the county, in the scenario where they've opted out and they're going through what's called the alternate debris removal program or the private debris removal program, once they've essentially completed the work and they've submitted that back to their county government, after the county's review of that, they would get essentially a clearance to move forward with rebuilding. The opt-out program works very similar to a building permit, where you would file your plans for what you're going to do. You'd do the work with a contractor, and then the county would inspect by reviewing the reports on the back end. So did I answer that question?
Cole, can I add something to that?
Yeah, of
If
course.
they don't, if they don't, if they don't fill out an ROE with the state program, or if they don't fill out an alternate program with the county, there also is the opportunity for the county to go in and do an abatement. Like Cole said, it has to be cleaned up one way or another. We don't tend to like to talk about that process, and it is like the no word, but we definitely want to make sure that they do understand that they have choices. It's just got to be one of those. And they do need to clean up their debris.
Yeah, great point, Amber. Okay, the second question we got was, are the property owners responsible for marking the septic, or is that something the contractors would do? So good question. The answer is essentially both. It is part of our process during the assessment phase, where our contractors will attempt to identify and mark any underground infrastructure. Of course, no one knows the property better than the property owner, though. And so we do encourage property owners either to provide a site sketch on their right of entry is a great way to do it, notate where the underground infrastructure is, or if they're available or they really think it can't be otherwise communicated, getting out there and marking it with stakes or paint in a safe manner is a pretty foolproof way to make sure the excavator operator knows where he's not supposed to go. But we do, take every step we can to locate that ahead of time. There are limits to what we, can find when we're new to your property. But that is generally the process. And I know I mentioned that as an example. That's a pretty rare scenario that we end up damaging a septic tank. But if we do, we would encourage folks to submit a claim, and we'll take a look at that. And we do routinely fix septic tanks if it's found to have been negligent.
Well, thank you, Cole. Thank you, Amber, for both being with us today. We have Jeremy Wilson and Jim Cooler with the Cal Hope and the Crisis Counseling Program on to talk. So we'll get to them, and then we will go to Nicole, and it looks like we're going to be on time. And any other questions anyone has, we'll do the Q&A for the panelists as soon as we work through these last two presentations. Thank you. And Jeremy, you should be able to share your screen. Go ahead if you've got some slides.
Well, thank you, Valerie, and thank you, Cole and Amber, for your flexibility, and congratulations on the group for being ahead of schedule. So glad that we can jump in. I'm Dr. Jim Cooler. I work at the Department of Healthcare Services as a special consultant, and the project that I've had the pleasure of working along with Jeremy is the Cal Hope program. And as you've been talking about a lot of the physical issues to be dealt with as part of a disaster, one of the other elements that we think is really important is just the behavioral health aspects and the stress and anxiety people feel as a result of any of these disasters. And California is far too familiar with experiencing these disasters. And most recently, in the last 2 years, no matter where you lived in California, you experienced the public health emergency of COVID and all of its variants. So while that is different than a wildfire or other disaster, we believe that the emotional stress is somewhat similar, and we created a set of tools to start to change the way we look about that mental wellness during a disaster, and trying to really make it more acceptable to not be okay, that it's hard, and just pulling up your bootstraps and trying to have a stiff upper lip is not going to get us safely through these disasters. So we work to try and make it okay not to be okay, and okay to ask for help. So Cal Hope is built on that principle of reaching everyone with a message that this is hard and you may have some challenges and it's okay to get help. And creating some web resources that might be enough to just give you some mindfulness tips and breathing tips and ways in which you can make yourself feel a little bit better. And that might be enough. But if that's not enough, then creating a warm line that you can call and talk to someone who may have had a similar experience and can give you some guidance. Also providing counseling, chat, and all of these services are preclinical, that we're really working on trying to support people where they are in their journey of stress and anxiety, and trying to help prevent them from needing higher levels of service. And if all those things don't work, then yes, there are county levels of services or EAP services or other services that can provide clinical help. But our goal with Cal Hope is to let folks know that they are not alone, and that there is help available, and that together we will find ways to get through this. So you've talked about a lot of the physical issues. We're here to just spend a couple minutes to talk about the emotional supports. So Jeremy can give you a little more detail about some of the process that we go through, and specifically some of the efforts that we did in the wildfire areas. So Jeremy, all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Cooler. So under the Cal Hope umbrella, when there is a declaration for a disaster, the states can apply through FEMA and SAMHSA for a crisis counseling program. And there's 2 phases to the crisis counseling program. The first is the Immediate Services Program, ISP, which is up to 60 days. Sometimes there are extensions depending on the circumstances, but really that is allows our state to, or any state, to get services out there as soon as possible, while also looking at what is all that is needed and what for the RSP, the Regular Services Program, is needed. The Crisis Counseling Program, the name itself is not in alignment with how California talks about public mental health services or just mental health services. And in the way that this is provided by individuals who are not clinical, they are not licensed. The intent is for it to be something to, when somebody needs just that short intervention, as Dr. Cooler said, it can be finding out what resources are available. Sometimes these individual sessions, these connections through CCP are less than 15 minutes. Sometimes people just need that quick connection with somebody. And the goal in it not being in a clinical setting or provided by licensed individuals is that it's people who might be your neighbors. It's people who understand what individuals, boots on the ground, need in that community. They're familiar with the community. So we get individuals out there. It might be someone that identifies as an individual with lived experience. It might be somebody who is from the different diverse communities that are within that geographic area. So in those first 60 days, Cal Mesa, Department of Healthcare Services, and Cal OES under the Cal Hope umbrella apply for those immediate services, the 60 days, get services out there. During those 60 days, we're developing the regular service program proposal that is sent to both FEMA and SAMHSA for approval, and that is up to 9 months. The 60-day and 9-month timelines are time limited because the goal is provide services and then also release all of the bottlenecking or the burdensome on all of the other local agencies that are responding to this disaster. So we don't have people waiting weeks, months to receive emotional support and understand what resources are there. And then also build community resiliency. So once all of this support is gone, then what? And what can you do as a community to support each other the next time there's a disaster or just in preparation for a disaster? In these cases, we know that the wildfire season in California, unfortunately, is getting longer. And so while there might not have been a recent fire in an area, it could be that a fire is now activating people. We know that some people leave those communities after a wildfire because of the property damage and loss. And unfortunately, sometimes they've moved into communities that are now experiencing a wildfire. We've heard this before with people who have left Butte County after the Camp Fire and they moved to Napa County. That next year, there was a fire. Right now, there's CCP services supporting Nevada County, and there is a wildfire that has broken out in the last few days. So there's also that, how do we support people for the long term? And as Dr. Cooler said, it's really normalizing, how do we support people? How do we make it okay to talk about not being okay? And that's done through these 3 specific buckets. There's outreach, costs that you can have individuals go in person, attending the long-term recovery groups, going and meeting with the different resource providers out there to see what is available, connecting directly with those survivors. So in person, and sometimes we've had success just letting all of the CCP providers, letting all of their partners know, we're here, this is what we can provide to you. And what they can provide are these sessions. They can be individual, they can be group sessions, they can be done in person, on the phone, or using a video conferencing platform, as well as resource navigation. So sometimes what the resources, there's just a lot of resources. And when you're experiencing, you've experienced a disaster, you're a survivor, that trauma can just add to that cognitive load. And you're trying to understand, okay, I just need to know where I can go for rental assistance. I need to know where I can go for to get a new job, or whatever it may be. The CCP providers help you work through that and connect you also to longer term services. You might be reaching out, and the first time you to a CCP provider, and the first time you connect with them, it opens up more than you expected. And we'd want to make sure that we're able to connect you to longer term services, whether that is in terms of recovery for physical, your property damage or your property loss, but also to the local mental health public system of care, public health, or any other long-term services. And of course, depending on your insurance. We do outreach through, again, in that in person, but also there is an opportunity to use a small media budget that focuses in on those local newspapers, the local radio. So it's not just media outlets at the state level that you're not seeing that information at the local level. These are many of the CCP partners. As I mentioned, SAMHSA, FEMA, Department of Healthcare Services, Cal OES, and then Cal Mesa is a joint power authority of all of the county behavioral health directors. So we work with the California Behavioral Health Directors Association, and we have the same board. So we also look at what is it that the county is able to provide in that disaster, and making sure that Cal Hope and the CCP is meeting that gap. Where there's something that's not being done, how can we fill that gap? There is not a requirement in terms of a number of sessions, number of hours. The design of this program is that it's available so that when survivors need support, that support is available to them. Currently, our CCP providers, Northern Valley Catholic Social Service is supporting Lassen, Plumas, Tehama, and Trinity counties. And then Nation's Finest is providing support to Nevada and Placer. Both of these providers have been CC providers on at least 2 other disasters. So they're very familiar with the program, and they're also very familiar with, generally speaking, what survivors need. Of course, every disaster is different, every community is different, every person's need is different, but they're very familiar, so they can quickly start implementing the program, and there's not as large of a learning curve on a new program or model. And we wanted to be brief and give you an overview. We will pass this PowerPoint on so that if there's any other information you'd want to learn more about, both Dr. Cooler and myself, our emails are available, and we'd be happy to talk with you more.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. Anything else to add?
Thank you for the opportunity, and we would love to have folks take advantage of the services that are available. And would love feedback on those services. If you've used them, we'd love to hear about it. If they work well, great. If they're not working, tell us and we can make them better.
Oh, thank you for that. All right, we will move to Nicole with SBA. Let her queue up now. Nicole, you should, if you need to share your screen, you should be able to.
Hey, well, it's not good morning. Let me correct that. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Nicole Lazama. I am the acting field operations supervisor for SBA. We're part of the Office of Disaster Assistance, and I work for Field Operations Center West, which is actually based out of Sacramento, California. And just for very quick background, our office covers basically the western side of the United States, so about 22 states and all of our territories. So that is kind of our area as well. And of course, California, of course, is included in that. And we work very closely with our other federal agencies, state agencies. This group, I recognize some individuals on this group that I'm happy to see on here as well, and appreciate all the great work you're doing and the invitation for this. So I do have I say PowerPoint, it really is almost like a leaflet, because I really want to kind of keep this specific for homeowners and renters. And so the majority of it, I'm going to share my screen, but the majority of it, I'm going to interject and talk about some of these pieces for sure. So anyways, moving forward, sorry, let me make sure that, click on that, right? Okay. Sorry about that. Get a little closer here. I'm sorry. So a few things for SBA disaster assistance loans. We make SBA disaster assistance loans, and they're available to help not only businesses, nonprofits, homeowners, and renters recover from declared disasters. Okay. You know, our disaster loans are the primary source of federal assistance for long-term recovery to help those private property owners pay for those disaster losses not covered by insurance or other recoveries. So in essence, really, if a home or a business has been damaged or destroyed by a federally declared disaster, those individuals may be eligible for an SBA disaster assistance loan. These loans are often, long-term, low interest rate, and available to businesses of all sizes, nonprofit organizations. I know I'm repeating myself, homeowners and renters, to repair or replace their uninsured or underinsured disaster damage property. In fact, really the vast majority of our disaster lending is to homeowners and renters. Okay, homeowners and renters are not only eligible to, for their disaster damaged property, their real estate, I should say, for homeowners, but homeowners and renters also can use a disaster loan to replace their personal property, which includes vehicles as well. Okay. As far as just a very, very brief overview, our physical damage disaster loans, where for the homeowners that can use those loan proceeds to repair or replace their primary residence to its pre-disaster condition, those loan limits are available up to $200,000. For damaged personal property loans, that would be obviously for both homeowners and renters. That amount is up to $40,000. The one thing I wanted to mention on the personal property loans, that, of course, you think about that, it's your household contents, it's your furniture, your appliances. It does also include vehicles. So if there's uninsured or an underinsured portion of the vehicle, that can be included in the personal property as well for homeowners and renters. We do also offer business loans, and I'm just going to say very, very quickly, touching on that. Not only for businesses, but I do want to mention if you have, let's say, individuals that own rental properties, that does fall under our business program, and we do have programs that are available to assist for that as well. Okay. As far as, and I know Jacqueline had touched on this earlier, but there's a few things. So we always stress in a presidentially declared or declaration, right? We always stress that there's no need to wait for a settled insurance claim. That could take months and months and maybe even beyond that, unfortunately. There's no need to wait for any potential FEMA grants. There's no need to wait for contractor estimates before applying, right? We understand, I think we're all very, very sensitive to this. People have gone through something very, very traumatic, right? They're many times dealing with more emergent situations, right? Where am I going to live? Do I have my daughter's medication? Those types of things too. So, the long-term recovery, I think I heard it very well. It is definitely a marathon, not a sprint, right? But it is important, right, for at least those individuals that have been referred to SBA in a presidentially declared declaration to apply, because what will happen is, if we are not able to offer them a loan and we deny them for an SBA disaster loan, I'd love to say that we're able to make loans to everybody, but the reality is we're not here to put anybody in financial harm's way or anything. If we are not able to offer a loan and we deny them, what happens is we will then refer them back to FEMA, to FEMA's Other Needs Assistance Program, where they may be eligible for other grants under that program. And I stress may. If they do not apply for our program, it really just, it stops that process. There's no other way of saying it, right? That there'll never be an outcome on that. The other piece of it too, really to stress to individuals, is there's no harm in applying for the loan, right? They still have complete control. If we come back and say, here, Mr. Smith, here's what we are able to do and what we are able to offer you, they are under no obligation at all to accept the loan, but they have a decision on it. They have it as a backup. If something happens and let's say their insurance, maybe they think their insurance is going to make them whole and it doesn't, And I think sadly, I don't think this group is any stranger to hearing this. A lot of times there are gaps, right, for that. They can come back to us and request that loan. They can even request increases, decreases, over the life of that loan as well too, or I should say increases for the first couple of years of the loan. Okay. So it is really, really crucial that those individuals that are referred to us apply, right? I mean, we just stress that, but obviously it is going to be up to that individual to make that decision for himself or herself. Okay. I did want to mention a few things too that you may or may not be aware of. I guess I should kind of go through, advance my slide, I apologize. I just kind of mentioned a few things already on this. Our loans are low interest, below market, long-term, potentially up to 30 years, they're 15 or 30. We base the payments on the borrower's ability to pay. So we'll definitely back into that payment based on what their situation is, their income and their expenses. A few other things, and this is kind of the piece that I was going to mention. Our loan program can also cover things like the insurance deductible. That's just one piece, right? Things like the insurance deductible, if there are code upgrades that are required, there's been damage, or in some cases the home is unfortunately completely destroyed and they're having to rebuild. Well, it's all going to be subject to whatever that current code is. And unfortunately, that in more times than not, it's going to add cost to it. So required building codes not covered by insurance, as well as in some cases, if individuals are looking to relocate, maybe they choose to not rebuild. I think I heard somebody mention that already. If they choose not to rebuild, perhaps maybe, and they want to relocate to a different area, our program would look at, can consider that option as well. So it's very broad scoping and covers quite a bit. It is really the reason why I wanted to mention some of those pieces on there. The other thing is that you may or may not be aware of is, we hear a lot about resiliency. I'm going to get this off of my, stop sharing this, sorry. We hear a lot about building back better and resiliency. I think that's, there's not a day that goes by that I think that all of us don't hear that. So what I do also want to make sure that everyone is aware of is, we do offer, SBA does offer mitigation funding, and really what that boils down to, and it's above and beyond their physical losses. Okay, individuals and business owners, for that matter, can request additional funding for things that will help protect that property from future damage from occurring. And one of the things, and I'm sorry, I was going to share this very quickly here, is, and maybe I won't, I apologize. You know what, I will, it does not look like I have it up. I'm so sorry, but I can just mention this. So a couple of things on for mitigation funding. So, for a fire, as an example, if somebody wanted to put like a fire rated roof onto their home, that could be above and beyond their losses. If they want to change from single pane to dual pane, as an example, that is another mitigation effort. There's I believe there's like mesh that can be put on to guard from like the ashes for the embers rather going down. That's really bad. I just lost my train of thought. The pipes, the gutters and those types of things too. So there's a lot of different things that they can look at including in that as well. People are wanting to elevate their home or whatever the case may be. So though it's just more for awareness that there are things that we can include to help build back better and stronger and more resilient. So sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought on the gutters and all of that on there. So that's pretty much all I really had in regards to these pieces. I did make a note of something that came up earlier, I think someone had said it with, you know, we're faced with a lot of challenges right now with, you know, we might be going into a period of time of weather that we can't build. There's a lack of contractors. There's a lack of supplies. And I think that's really a big one right now that everybody is facing. So, you know, our program does have, again, a lot of flexibility built into it. So if someone is, I'll give a really good example. Somebody is approved for a loan. And I think I spoke to somebody within the last 2 or 3 weeks in regards to this. I'm trying to remember which fire it was. It might have been the campfire, to be perfectly honest. But you know, they purchased a manufactured home. That manufactured home has been delayed. I don't know how many times. I think we've lost count, right? So obviously we're not going to, you know, we're not going to provide that loan and have somebody start paying on it until they take ownership of the property, of course. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware. What happens is when a loan is approved, the individuals have a case manager that they're working with, right? And there is communication going back and forth in regards to that. And we can kind of keep looking at extending, you know, 3-month extension, 3-month extension, what have you. And that is happening a lot in this day and age right now. You know, even for things, not just the rebuilding, but you know, purchasing that manufactured home, there are a lot of delays with that, I think. And again, I don't need to tell this group that. I'm sure you hear that every day as well. So I just wanted to mention those pieces because I know that the periods of time are getting, it feels like it, right? And it's true that are getting longer and longer to getting to that rebuilding or the repair process or what have you. So again, our program does have a lot of flexibility built in it. And I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. And then the last thing too, that I just wanted to mention is when I say kind of, you know, the flexibility built into it, people don't need to go in knowing how much money that they're going to need to repair or rebuild to start off with. It's impossible, right? I mean, it's impossible to know, especially when the home, you know, you're dealing with a slab foundation and having to go through all of those, the debris removal and the soil sand, all of that, right? It takes time and what have you. So, you know, we can start a process and kind of, you know, start with like a starting figure, if you will, right? And it is kind of a moving target, right? Once they start, you know, rebuilding, it's almost kind of like a construction loan is really the best way to kind of explain those pieces of it. We don't front them all of the money. It's kind of as they need it in installments, right? And things will inevitably come up, right? Where, you know, maybe somebody thought a home that was damaged, that the air conditioning unit was fine, but all of a sudden it's not, and that wasn't initially included. So our program will gives a lot of flexibility and will allow up to 2 years from the date of the loan, right? The actual loan origination to request any kind of an increase to cover some of it, to cover for that, right? Kind of as a fail safe in there to cover those pieces as well. So I just wanted to add on those couple of things because I did hear a couple of, I think, statements on some of those pieces, and we understand the supply chain is definitely an issue. Building material is an issue. Contractors are probably overwhelmed, and we do get that does slow the timing down on that. So I will say that is really all I have. Again, I just wanted to kind of keep this very brief. I will certainly put my information down in the chat. If there's any questions, I can certainly take any questions. But I did want to say last but not least that it is very important, I think, that we have all lines of effort. Other federal agencies, state agencies, local nonprofits, you do an amazing job helping with the unmet needs. And again, I do recognize some names on here that I've worked with before. And we really, really do appreciate all of that. And I know most importantly, the individuals do in getting the need that they that they desperately need to repair, rebuild, and go back to their normal lives. So that is all I have, unless there's any questions. But again, I really do appreciate everybody's time, and I thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you. And we do have 2 questions for you in the chat. One is, if the client applies for a loan and gets granted, how long does the offer for the loan last? I thought it was is it a 2-year time period?
Is that the one? I have a client that denied their approved SBA loan, but then wanted to reactivate it.
It's one above that, but you can answer
Oh,
that one too.
I'm so sorry.
Good too, yeah.
It is 15 or 30 years. That's an easy one. That is really just based solely on affordability of the payment. More times than not, it's usually 30 years. But if you have somebody that high income, no debt, to be perfectly blunt, it could be 15 years. But that is going to be up to the loan officer to make that determination. The second piece on a client that was denied their approved SBA loan, that's kind of double stating on that. I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption, and we can talk about this offline. If they were approved, I'm guessing that maybe it was withdrawn for
Might have declined to take.
Yes, yeah, I'm assuming that it wasn't a deny, it was probably a withdrawal. That would make more sense. If they want to reactivate it, sorry, I'm reading down. You know what? I would say with that one, you have a specific, Nancy, you have a specific case. Let's talk about that one offline. Maybe I can get in and take a look at it. Maybe I can get the individual on the phone because I think there's probably something more to that, but they should be able to reactivate the loan. They should.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nicole.
And I think there was one last one, a time limit following the disaster that survivors have to apply following the declaration. I think that's the last one. Generally speaking, it's 60 days, whatever that application filing deadline is from the declaration. There are times when they can be extended. So if it's extended out another 30 days, it's whatever that time frame is. Beyond that, we do have a 15-day grace period. And truly, even beyond that, individuals can still apply. They may not be able to apply online because we do eventually take the online portal down for declarations, and that's typically 45 days after the application filing date ends. All it really means is that they need to submit an application and include an explanation as to why they were late. It could be something as very simple as, I thought my insurance was going to make me whole and it didn't. I would like to apply for this. All I can really say, to be very general, the bigger the event, I mean, we're pretty flexible and liberal on this piece, but the bigger the event, generally the more flexibility and wiggle room we have. If the reasoning and rationale makes sense, I could tell you our processing center will accept it. Typically, we just can't guarantee, say, a blanket statement guarantee, but we're pretty liberal.
Well, thank you so much. This is our Q&A period. Obviously, we've moved right into that. So thank you, Nicole, for that. And do we have any questions for any of the panelists that we've seen today? I'll be frank, if they've already gone off, if they don't respond when you ask the question, just put it in the chat and I'll follow up with them to get you an answer. So any questions for anyone that we've got? Anything that you guys collectively want to know or talk about? All right.
Can I ask a question?
Please ask a question.
Okay. I don't know if anybody can answer this, and it's probably for Cal OES. We don't have a USDA RD representative, but I want to make sure my understanding about the LOPE letter is correct, because it was my understanding that if you were a survivor from a declared disaster, you could be issued a LOPE letter that would help you get into affordable housing, a rental. And I just heard from USDA and they said, no, that's not accurate. So I'm just kind of wondering, is there a way we can push that boundary and able to help some of our disaster survivors to get a LOPE letter?
Is that at the county level or for that jurisdiction? I'm just trying to.
Federal. It's federal level through the USDA RD program.
Jacqueline and
April.
Hi. Can you hear me well? I can't turn my camera on right now. Sorry. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Jacqueline.
Listen, I feel like if I answer that question, I'm going to jump into a hot soup. I am happy to try to follow up on that. I have some information about it. I haven't been a part of any conversations about it, however, but I can try to be your point of contact. If you can just kind of send me an email, Nancy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And let me know who your person is, and I'll try to look into that. I just don't have an answer for you right now.
And
that'd be super sweet.
That's perfect. I'm looking for somebody to be a connector. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Not trying to put you on the hot seat. All right. Any other questions? I know everyone is probably dehydrated and food deprived at this point. So if you need to pop off, please do. But I want to make sure we take advantage of having our panelists here to get your questions answered. All right, there being no questions at this point, I'm going to give our panelists one last chance to just give you some words of wisdom, guidance, something they want you to have as a takeaway. Don?
Hi, just want to end like I always do. Take care of yourself and thank you for everything you do, every one of you. Good show. Good job, Belle.
Thanks, everybody. This has been amazing for us.
This has been very informational for me. This is my second one. Last year I was very new at this, and now I've got another year of experience. And all the information presented was very, very informational, and just I hope that everybody can take away, the information presented and go forth.
Thank you for that, Susan. Yeah, you're seeing the evolution in real time. Well,
Valerie, if I could add for the new disaster case managers, kind of like what everybody else said, just breathe through it. You're going to make it, and you're going to be a valuable resource for people in the future. It's no way to learn all of these programs and all of this information immediately. Your survivors will teach you, you'll learn from them, and you'll be a resource, not only for them, but for your community. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. And thank you for making that point, because it really is like drinking from a fire hose when you have a disaster in your community. And whether you're a case manager or a long-term recovery group member, it is just way too much. You're not going to get it. It's not going to click. And so, just be kind to yourself. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. You're not going to have the answers to everything. Nobody should expect you to. And it's okay to say, I don't know, let me check, right? That's, people just want to be heard so much of the time.
So this is Kat. And I also want to put in, if you know of agencies that have provided disaster case management, like for Campfire, those guys had to jump through a lot of hoops. So they are great resources for you to go call them and say, hey, we have this situation. Have you dealt with this before? And if so, how did you meet that need? Because they're a great resource too. North Valley Catholic Social Services, I've worked with them since I got here in 2020. And same with St. Vincent de Paul. So those are great places to go to find out how, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's already invented. You just need to find the information to have it work for you.
All right. Anyone else with anything you'd like to share?
Valerie, I just wanted to add just a few comments. I'll make it quick. So again, thank you everyone for being here and sharing such valuable information. I know that this information is really helpful for our disaster case management staff and also our new agencies. So again, thank you. Secondly, I just wanted to add that if you have any resources or information that you think would be helpful for disaster case managers, please feel free to reach out to either me or Valerie. I know specifically for Catholic Charities of California, we have a resource page for all of our provider agencies under the FEMA-funded disaster case management program. And we're always looking for things to add and to update on that site. We can also see getting you added, getting you guys added to the next quarterly workshops, which are kind of like a follow-up to this meeting. And I apologize, that is my 4-month-old puppy that is just having well.
All right, well, thank you, Shama and Val Mahanovich for helping pull this together. I appreciate all our presenters. I appreciate all of you making time for us today. We're going to try this again tomorrow. You know, as you can see, this is a work in progress, not a work of art. So we just pivot and flex as things happen. So we'll do our best to get everything to you. So appreciate your patience. Please go eat, take care of yourself. Don't overwhelm yourself in catching up today. And, you know, again, just be kind and we'll look for you tomorrow morning.